Hello everypony, welcome to part 2 of the My Little Pony Season 1 retrospective. If you haven't seen part 1 yet or need a refresher, make sure to go check that out first. The link will be in the description or on the card or wherever. It's not like this video won't make any sense without it, but there are quite a few callbacks to it. But speaking of which, I read all your feedback and criticism of part 1. Thank you for that. And I understand when y'all are saying that I'm focusing too much on unnecessary details and stuff. So for this part 2, I didn't implement any of your feedback, but only because my thoughts on this entire season as a whole were all written in one go as one giant video, and the script for all 3 parts of this retrospective, aka the whole season, were written to make sense when all viewed together. So what may have seemed like me spending time focusing on unnecessary details in part 1 was actually just set up for part 2 and what's to come in part 3. What didn't cross my mind is how my points would have come across without the full picture out yet. So I should have clarified that a lot more in part 1. I apologize for that, sincerely. I tend to be too focused on the bigger picture, like aka on this whole completed retrospective and how that'll play out, that I wasn't thinking how things will come across when part 1 is viewed in isolation by itself. And just to prove that I'm not like making that up as an excuse after the fact, all the parts where I'm going to be on screen in this retrospective, in part 2 and part 3, it's all the same angle from part 1 because I recorded that all in one go. So, yeah. I mean, these are just the problems that comes up when you're a one-man team and you don't have any friends to bounce ideas and perspectives off of. Going forward with Season 2, I'll take better care to make that more obvious for you guys. On an unrelated note, seeing how long this video is, I have opened up a new Discord server, link in description, if y'all want to chat with like-minded individuals while watching. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. Oh boy, it's the racism episode. Immediately from the first spoken dialogue here, I'm confused.
Rainbow Dash must have gotten up early for once and cleared all the clouds away.
Is that to say that Rainbow Dash is solely responsible for what the weather will be like each day? Is that a reference to how there were multiple Pegasi who aren't Rainbow Dash taking care of the weather in literally the last f***ing episode? On top of that, is it just me or does it sound like Twilight's voice is really off? It doesn't help that her actual dialogue is the most unnatural sounding thing anyone could possibly say.
Wow, what a gorgeous day. I bet all of Ponyville is going to be out enjoying the sunshine.
Twilight and Spike find the town to be deserted, and coincidentally all their friends are hiding in the Sugar Cube corner. Also, the fact that Spike says that Rainbow Dash must have gotten up early implies that this is still morning. Early enough for Rainbow Dash to be usually doing weather stuff at this hour. Does that mean that the rest of the main 6 all agreed to wake up extra early to all hang out at Pinkie's place without Twilight? Whatever the case may be, it turns out that they're hiding from this individual. Also, isn't it amazing how this one little instance of Berry Punch pulling Berry Pinch into this house earned her the nickname of Overly Protective Parent Pony, but more on her later. We get her first prominent appearance of Apple Bloom, who asks,
Did you see Zecora?
with Applejack barging in and saying,
I told you never to say that name.
first of all, how did they find out her name in the first place? Knowing Zecora's name would imply that Zecora has told a pony her name before, presumably in a conversation. Did Zecora come across as creepy during that conversation? Because if she sounded reasonable and explained herself in this conversation, none of this makes sense, unless she left a note with her signature on it, maybe? Secondly, what's wrong with saying her name? Has this town's habit of completely shutting down whenever Zecora is around been going on for a long enough time for there to have been superstitions made around saying her name? Thirdly, hypocrite! That's like unironically saying, guys, no f***ing swearing aloud. While stalking Zecora through the window, Rarity says this.
Just look at those stripes. So garish.
Which, she doesn't know any better, so whatever. But then what's with this reaction when Twilight explains?
And her stripes aren't a fashion choice, Rarity. They're what she was born with.
To be fair, the ponies actually bring up valid reasons for finding her scary, such as the fact that she lives in the Everfree Forest, which we shall come back to later. For now, I want to bring up how this is literally a complete 180 of Twilight from the last episode. Last episode, she was very oblivious to everything, not knowing anything. Now she's a know-it-all with an encyclopedic knowledge to the point where she's acting condescending and snarky. Where's the consistency? So Pinkie sings this song about Zecora.
She's an evil enchantress. She does evil dances. And if you look...
That wasn't as good as Rainbow Dash's I Got the Ticket song, but this should also be on Spotify. But I guess this song not being on Spotify must have struck a nerve with Twilight since she starts acting like this for no reason.
Once a month, she comes into Ponyville. Ooh. She lurks by the stores.
Oh my.
She digs at the ground.
Good gracious.
And I guess even Apple Bloom found her annoying here since she sneaks out to follow Zecora. So they go to look for Apple Bloom to bring her back, and this part's kind of stupid. The next day, the main 6 all have something weird about them, with them all assuming that they've been cursed by Zecora. But we know upon rewatch that they're not actually cursed, they just got pranked because they touched these flowers. So how come Apple Bloom was walking in this road with one path, which was clear, Yet when we get this shot, the path she walked through also has the poison joke in it. Did this entire field grow between shots? Anyway, Spike gives them these nicknames.
We got Harity, Rainbow Crash, Spitty Pie, Apple Teeny, Flutter Guy, and I got nothing. Twirly Sparkle. I mean, seriously, I can't even work with that.
And I like how Apple Teeny only works as a pun if you know your alcoholic beverages. But more importantly, the writer of this episode, Amy Keating Rogers, posted the original notes for Spike's roasts. Harity, Rainbow Crash, Flutter Guy, Apple Teeny, Droopy Horn, and Pinkie Pie ? Interesting how Twilight had a roast written out for her, but Pinkie didn't. There's a bit to unpack here. First of all, was the Y changed to an I in Droopy so they don't legally butt heads with the character Droopy? A similar thing happened with how Angel was supposed to be a mouse called Mortimer until they got the memo that Mortimer Mouse exists, so perhaps? Also, it's kind of funny how when they finally actually came up with a roast name for Pinkie in the episode, it was easily the weakest one out of the bunch, so I guess Pinkie Pie's name is just hard to come up with something for. But speaking of Pinkie...
Really? You wanna hear a personal space? No.
She's never heard of personal space? That explains a lot. So Applejack follows Apple Bloom along as she tries to find Zecora again, and isn't it a little disturbing how Apple Bloom literally leaves her own sister to die?
Sorry, Applejack, but I'm the big sister now.
Like, she was supposed to be the one likable thing in this episode, but nope, that's gone out the window too. So the rest of the main six follow after Apple Bloom, and...
She stole your song?
Doesn't sound anything like your song.
She's an evil enchantress. Watch out.
You saw those terrible things. Now do you believe us, Twilight?
I like how Harity waited for Flutter Guy to finish the song before saying anything.
What if she's making apple bloom soup? What if she's making apple bloom soup?
Wow, great use of ad break double take. Then Zecora starts chanting, and if you're wondering what she's actually saying here, isn't it quite something how, according to Goddess Faust, we did not have the time or resources to have authentic Swahili, so we asked the voice actress to ad-lib some African-sounding gibberish. I was a bit disappointed, but I just imagine it's not Swahili, it's zebra. Disappointed in what? Not being able to hire a Swahili consultant, or in the actual ad-libbing, saying that her voice actress, Brenda Critchlow, actually did a bad job. Which seems like an interesting thing to just put publicly on your DeviantArt, but sure. More on Zecora herself later, but...
No!
Holy crap, do the writers just want to make the main six super unlikable? This is kind of uncalled for, ain't it? So Zecora explains everything, and they go back to Ponyville to get the remedy to what they have, and wow, it seems like Trixie's been practicing her magic, since she's apparently able to make clones of herself now. Anyways, we get this appearance of the flower ponies, and enjoy and savor this because this is the last time we're going to be seeing them so prominently for a while.
Look, Rose, how awful! The wicked enchantress has cursed them all! The horror! The horror!
It sucks because them being overreactive could have been a really funny recurring gag, especially since that would have given us an excuse to give non-main six characters recurring speaking roles. But I can also see it getting pretty old pretty fast.
Hey, where's Applejack?
Wow, nice reuse of the gasp from episode 1. I mean, they also reused this in episode 1, but still. I wonder if they keep reusing this because it hurts to perform. I don't want to jump the gun, but it's still worth noting that a handful of this season has episodes with really stupid conflicts that really make no sense. As TV Tropes takes these words right out of my mouth. The viewer is supposed to find the cast suspicions of Zecora to be unfounded and based on misconceptions. Problem is that while they do go overboard, their suspicion isn't entirely baseless. 1. Zecora lives in a forest that's infamous for being full of dangerous creatures. 2. Zecora is a zebra, a species that none of the cast members have ever seen before and have no frame of reference for. 3. Later episodes confirm that there are all sorts of dangerous creatures and persons in the setting. 4. Zecora's behavior doesn't exactly help her case. She shows up wearing a cloak with glowing eyes of doom, and when she comes around, she just sort of walks around aimlessly rather than making any attempt to communicate. In light of that, it isn't really that odd that the townfolk are a bit wary of her. It's especially true in AJ's case. It's not exactly surprising that she'd want to keep her little sister from following a stranger into a dangerous forest. And that's facts. Still, obviously, I get what this episode is trying to say. They even literally spell it out for you.
Never judge a book by its cover. Someone may look unusual or funny or scary, but you have to look past that and learn who they are inside.
And while I get the lesson, and I'm being mostly hyperbolic here, I'm pretty sure judging people by their cover could save your life under certain circumstances. Like if I was walking late at night and there's like a dark alleyway that's like a shortcut home, but I saw someone like this or this or this standing on the other side, I'd rather stay safe than sorry and take the longer route. You could be thinking, F, that's rude, that's inconsiderate, you don't know what's inside of them, they could really be nice individuals. Would you? Well, would you? Don't lie to me, cut the cap, you wouldn't either, I guarantee it. Whatever, at least we got the shot of Pinkie doing this, which turned into this meme to greet new bronies. Welcome to the herd indeed. We're like 9 episodes down with 212 more to go. This episode starts with Fluttershy singing and picking flowers.
La 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 la.
At least we're not getting the theme song hummed like before. Anyways, the squirrel offers this dandelion for the collection just for it to be killed by the most inconvenient appearance of wind in existence. Which, the wind existing should suggest that these flowers that are being placed on top of each other and not being fitted snugly should also fly off, but sure. Wow, nice to see Fluttershy's flower bag has a mind of its own. Then this rock becomes sentient. Never mind, that ain't no sentient rock. That's just Navi from Zelda. Though, while on the topic of rocks, this looks like it has a tumor growing out of it. Further inspection will reveal that this is a rock a few feet away from this main rock, but it looks really weird. I suppose we can add not having proper depth perception between items in the background as something that makes the first season tonally different. Since, at least as far as rocks are concerned, later seasons give them more detailing, so you can actually tell where one stone ends and another begins. So Fluttershy murders this apple to make it easier for this insect to consume, just for it to go up and eat this entire basket of apples instead. Which, there's a couple odd things here. Firstly, who the frick left this perfectly good apple basket here? And why was this insect hiding behind a rock, opposed to just being in the middle of already eating all these apples? Secondly, despite Fluttershy being very passionate about wildlife, this is apparently the first time she's seen one of these?
I've never seen anything like you before.
And she immediately lets it snuggle in her mane. This is stupid. Clearly, Fluttershy isn't afraid of insects, like how some people are and some people aren't. But shouldn't everyone at least be cautious around insects you've never seen before? Since poisonous insects exist, isn't the smart thing just to be weary around any that potentially could be? Now, you might be thinking, maybe poisonous insects just don't exist in Equestria. Maybe insects that are poisonous to us aren't poisonous to Wow, I can't wait till we get to Season 7, Episode 20, so I actually have a rebuttal to that argument. Thirdly, seeing a pony as peaceful as Fluttershy literally crushing something, resembling a small creature spilling its guts, is kind of tonally jarring from the rest of the show. It doesn't help at all how, for me in particular, I actually saw the Friendship is Witchcraft version of this episode before the real thing, so I had no idea what the actual context of Fluttershy crushing this apple would have been.
Oh, did you find a new friend? I killed it.
And yes, I will do a Friendship is Witchcraft retrospective on this channel one day. Just be patient. Because for now, there are more pressing matters to deal with, such as how instead of just killing this apple, she must have also killed this entire basket of flowers too, since it's gone now. So Twilight talks about how Princess Celestia is going to visit them tomorrow, and...
Oh, hurry up, Spike. This place isn't gonna clean itself.
It also didn't mess itself up.
Roasted! Twilight then goes to town to check up on preparations, and damn, that's kind of a nice subtle callback to episode 1 if that was intended. Though the dumb thing about this is how there's a plain English text,
What happened to the rest of her name?
We couldn't fit it all in.
which might not initially seem like a big deal, but then once you realize that this is pretty much the only time something is written out in plain English in the show, it's a little questionable. Every other instance of text in this universe is usually gibberish or non-existent, like the book from last episode. They usually do this so that they don't have to re-edit everything for dubs and stuff, which is smart, since when a show has text in a certain language, yet don't change it for dubs, it's a little distracting to say the least.
Where's Alia?
So I made sure to check dubs of this episode to see if they edited this, since this actually seems pretty easy to edit, but nah, I guess not. Then I thought, okay, maybe Korean is just too uncommon of a language to justify an entire scene alteration. So I checked the Japanese one, since the Japanese version of the show has its own theme song. So surely they'd care enough to make this one change. So then I checked the Spanish one, since that's probably the second most common language the show is watched in, but nope. That makes this joke really stand out, especially because when we do see their text, it's called Ponish, or Pony Latin, yet we have this sign in English. Then again, Pinkie also says,
It was under E.
implying that they used the same alphabet, my head's going to explode. Also, this whole Ponish and Pony Latin thing can't be excused in Equestria Girls, where it makes no sense for them to be talking in Ponish and Pony Latin, yet their text looks like this. Anyways, Twilight visits Mr. and Mrs. Cake at the Sugar Cube Corner.
How's the banquet coming?
Nice to see that the Apple family ain't in charge of the banquet for this event. Perhaps Princess Celestia wasn't pleased with their performance during the Summer Sun celebration. Fluttershy shows up and finds her new pet duplicated and gives one to Twilight.
3? I'll take one off your hooves.
Then she visits Rarity for one reason or another and,
This is way too boring for me. Do you want to look nice for Princess Celestia or not?
I refuse to believe that Rainbow Dash would have look nice for the princess as a priority whatsoever. Sure, she might want to look cool in front of her or want the princess's respect, but that seems more like something more personality-based. I doubt that she believes looking like this would achieve that.
I only had one a minute ago.
I'll take one. Me too. Oh, they're perfect.
The funny thing about the next scene is how Twilight says,
Oh, the decorations, the banquet. I really hope everything comes together in time for tomorrow.
she points out how she checked up on the decorations and food, but doesn't actually specify why she went to Rarity's for. I mean, yes, she was making a dress for Rainbow Dash, but it's not specified if that was just something they're doing together as friends or if it was anything officially affiliated with the event. Anyway, she wakes up to see a billion of these guys flying about, and we get this depressing joke.
Spike, help me round up these little guys.
What does it look like I'm doing? I know. Stop fooling around.
Bruh, how often must Twilight reprimand Spike for things out of his control that this is his default response? The rest of the episode just deals with these Parisprites duplicating and causing havoc, though, is this Rainbow Dash's house? Is she homeless? I know we see her actual house later in the show, and this shot was presumably composed like this because they weren't in the mood to design and rig an entire Rainbow Dash's room location just for one shot, and that's understandable. However, it's the fact that they had her sleeping. Did she sleep here overnight, or was she just napping? We've seen a few episodes ago that nobody in this universe bats an eye at ponies napping in public, but it's just because we got the scene with Twilight just waking up and this music cue, which would imply that this is still morning. Either way, Rainbow Dash sleeping on this bench outdoors resembles homeless people sleeping on benches. Wait a second, why is she suddenly not on the bench? That's just uncanny. Anyways, these Parisprites take Ponyville under attack and start eating all their crops and food, because even though for all intents and purposes the main six got rid of them, Fluttershy decided to secretly keep one.
We did it! Nice work, Applejack. Where did they come from?
Well, I may have kept just one.
Fluttershy dooming Ponyville counter? One of the ways these Parisprites terrorize Ponyville is by eating Lyra's pie, with Lyra reacting by tearing up, and of course, because this is a bit of an unusual reaction, this didn't go unnoticed, with memes of this being made as well.
I got it! I'll cast a spell to make them stop eating all the food.
What? That's a spell? Sure, garbage disposal just got easier, but cool to see that Twilight could theoretically starve an entire species to death. Sure, Parisprites can apparently survive off eating anything and everything, but what if she cast this spell on us humans? We definitely cannot survive off eating wood. Also, if she can magic an entire species into not being able to eat food, I think the fuck she can magic them into not being able to eat objects either. But apparently not, as Twilight goes to Zecora for help.
Have you gone mad?
I mean, that didn't seem too different from how the main six treated her in the last episode. But judging by how Zecora says this, we can assume that these two have talked since the last episode for her to be able to tell that this is out of character for Twilight. Though you're telling me you got close to Zecora in between one episode? I appreciate the callback to the last episode. I really do. But couldn't we have made these not in direct succession? That way the dynamic is much more believable and not forced. In fact, this scene is incredibly pointless too. All Zecora does is tell Twilight that Ponyville is beyond relief.
You're doomed.
And Twilight goes back to panicking in Ponyville in the very next scene. At least it was cool filler, even if it did cause that little dissonance. Also, it kind of implies that Twilight was fine with Zecora dying, seeing how she definitely knows Parisprites are dangerous at this point, yet brought one over to her.
Okay, here's the plan. Rainbow Dash, you distract them. Everyone else, we need to build an exact copy of Ponyville right over there. We've got less than a minute.
Twililight's reaction here is genuinely funny, and I like seeing characters getting pushed past their breaking point. It calls for some interesting story. Then Princess Celestia comes to visit, but her entire visitation is so weird. First of all, you would imagine that a royal visit like this would have a formal welcome from the mayor or something, but it's so nonchalant. And all she says is that they're going to have to move the visit to some other day, along with the implication that the main six basically left another village/city to starve.
I'm afraid an emergency has come up in Philadelphia. Apparently there's been some sort of infestation.
Also, Rarity's horn goes from normal to gross. Then Princess Celestia abruptly asks Twilight for a friendship lesson.
Before I have to go, would you care to give me your latest report on the magic of friendship in person?
Which is probably made a bit stranger by how this is the first time Twilight reports a friendship lesson in person. I don't know, this entire scene is kind of clunky. It doesn't help how we see some goofy angles that aren't really seen later on in the show. With all that said, the lesson is...
I've learned that sometimes the solution to your problems can come from where you least expect it. It's a good idea to stop and listen to your friends' opinions and perspectives, even when they don't always seem to make sense.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot to mention any of Pinkie's scenes.
Look, Rarity! Applejack loaned me a harmonica! And not a moment too soon! You know how many more instruments I've got to find? A lot! That's how many!
So there's this recurring gag throughout the episode where Pinkie keeps mentioning how she needs instruments.
Does any pony know where I can find an accordion? Gals!
And the rest of the main six thinking she's just being random.
You are so random. And you are also stubborn!
And because it turns out Pinkie actually needed all sorts of instruments because they lure Parisprites away, Twilight talks about how you should always listen to your friends. Now, this entire lesson falls apart on the simple account that Pinkie didn't even try explaining herself to anyone or anything. It would be one thing if Pinkie tried explaining why she's doing what she's doing just to get brushed off by her friends, but she doesn't even try and assumes on her part that her friends know why she needs all those instruments.
Will you forget about your silly instruments for 1 second? You're ruining our efforts to save Ponyville! I'm not the ruiner! I am the ruinee! Or is it ruin us? Ruinette?
If Pinkie just explained what she's up to, this entire disaster could have been avoided.
I'm trying to tell you all that the ruining is on the other hoof! If you just slow down and listen to me!
I mean, maybe they'd listen if you just cut to the chase. I think, especially along with the last two episodes, these episodes are really being tied down by having to teach a moral at the end. I get that that's Twilight's entire mission and all that, yada yada, but I may be wrong, but it does seem like the writers really wanted to embrace the adventure stories, like Dragonshy, yet they were tied down by these friendship lessons and morals that they were being forced to spell out at the end. We get a whole episode with this as the metatextual context in Season 2, but it's kind of cool to see this for ourselves, these little quirks in writing that may not be apparent on the surface. But on that note, you're telling me that Pinkie is the only one in this entire frickin' town who knows what Parisprites are? Not even this gardener whose job it probably is to know about potential pests? The main explanation for this seems to be that because Pinkie was raised on a farm, she was probably taught about all these pests at a young age. But then by that logic, you'd assume that Applejack would also know because she also grew up on a farm. And especially Fluttershy would also know because she grew up with animals and wildlife. But anyways, this episode essentially ends with businesses being ruined, food supply being shortened drastically, homes being destroyed, and that's played for laughs. How is that funny? I believe that the reason this episode concluded this way is because, once again, the writers were definitely trying to make the show lean much more into slapstick humor. And in slapstick humor, characters and things get hurt over and over and over again with clearly no repercussions that carry over to the future. However, the reason this feels so out of place in this show is because, without getting too ahead of ourselves, later on in the show, a certain building being destroyed calls for its own plot point spanning multiple episodes. So that's another thing we can add to the list of why older seasons feel different. I mean, the entire Sweet Apple Acres barn got demolished in this episode. That's not something that would have happened as a gag in later episodes. Still, while this episode does have low lows, it does have high highs. Like, this gag of Parisprites eating words out of books is creative.
They're eating the words!
And this interaction never fails to make me laugh. Anyways, as for some behind-the-scenes stuff, this episode was originally supposed to be called Pied Piper Pinkie, which would have made the allusion to the Pied Piper story much more apparent, and while I think that the title is cooler, it might have, spoiled the ending, so whatever. Also, it's kind of cool seeing Lauren Faust saying she had Tribbles from Star Trek in mind while working on the episode, but with M.A. Larson saying that he was thinking more about Gremlins than Tribbles.
I know I was surprised when I heard that you hadn't watched the Tribble episode, but you wrote Swarm of the Century, and so many people made the connection between the Parisprites and the Tribbles, but that wasn't in your mind.
It kind of was. It was more Gremlins, but it definitely was. I mean, I still haven't seen the Tribble episode, but I know what it is. You know, I've heard it referenced so many times, and I know the basic storyline. But I haven't seen it.
I think it's interesting how you can have two people inspired by two different things with a similar trope and create this product from it. It just makes me think of all you future writers out there who will create stories based off this episode or other episodes of this show. But I think that's enough of that. Let's move on.
Spike, wake up! Wake up!
This episode starts off with a rather depressing note.
Mommy?
Winter wrap-up.
You're not Mommy.
Even though at this point in the show, we're not aware that Spike doesn't know who his actual parents are, this 1-2-second joke is depressing in hindsight, especially when you realize that Spike never got to know his parents, and dreaming is possibly the only way he would ever be able to lose himself from the harshness of reality of being ripped apart from his mommy and daddy at such a young age. Anyways, Twilight talks about how today is the annual winter wrap-up, which is when ponies clear up the season of winter in order to transition into spring.
The first day of spring is tomorrow, so every pony in Ponyville needs to clean up winter.
Though when she opens the door, it seems like winter has already been cleaned up. There's not a trace of winter in sight. Like later when we go outside, there's snow everywhere. There's nothing in this shot to insinuate winter, which is weird. Also, nice to see that Twilight stole Rarity's scarf. And also, nice to see that when it's actually time for winter wrap-up, she's not even wearing any of this. And I thought she was always overly punctual. Why is she now suddenly late? The citizens of Ponyville split off mostly based on race to do their duties, with Twilight pondering over who she should help.
Oh gosh, where should I go? I'm not sure where I'd fit in.
What kind of stupid conundrum is that? Duh, I'm a unicorn. Should I go help the Pegasi or the ones I can actually help with? Who came up with this? Well, let's at least appreciate the prominence of Mayor while we still have the chance.
All right, every pony, find your team leader, and let's get galloping.
Anyways, then we get our very first non-Pinkie solo song in the entire show, unless we're counting the I Got the Ticket song, I guess. Or I guess technically Flutterguy's rendition of Evil Enchantress. Anyways, this is notable since most people really seem to only remember the song Winter Wrap-Up rather than the actual contents of the rest of the episode, which makes sense since so far the main conflict of this episode seems stupid. But on that note, why does this song sound so much sadder than I remember?
3 months of winter coolness and awesome holidays.
This first verse gives us a perspective on having to let go of winter even though they like it, since the season is over, which is bittersweet, so I guess that's fitting, but this just looks and sounds depressing. There's something perhaps a little uncanny how these ponies are in some unknown blank location, along with their silhouettes being frozen in time. But overall, hot damn, this song is super nostalgic and comfy. The tempo change, the harmonies, the bridge, don't even get me started.
No easy task to clear the ground, plant our tiny seeds.
Still, there are some things that don't add up. This doesn't apply to only the song, but it is definitely highlighted in the song. Earlier, Twilight specified this.
Don't they just use magic to change the seasons like we do in Canterlot?
Ponyville was started by Earth ponies, so for hundreds of years they've never used magic to clean up winter.
So if she can't help out using magic, since that's not the
Earth pony way.
By that logic, why the are the Pegasi allowed to fly around? And on that note, Twilight is wondering throughout the song how she's going to fit in without using any magic when her special talent is magic. You know what would be a nice way of finding out? Asking other unicorns! It seems like every opportunity that arises to actually give some non-main 6 characters some dialogue to do some world building, the writers shoot themselves in the foot, and I will never understand that. It's very possible that the studio didn't want them to this early in the show, but still, that would have actually made this world feel more lived in. The fact that they don't leaves us with a bunch of unnamed recolors inhabiting this world that we're supposed to be feeling immersed in. This is why I believe so many people love putting emphasis on background characters, just to attempt to give this world more breadth. If all the fanon lore on some of these characters didn't exist, I think this fandom and perhaps the show itself would have been a lot more boring. But speaking of background characters, nice to see Derpy's helping out. Wait, that's not Derpy. Unless if she dyed her hair red for some reason. Oh, never mind, that wasn't Derpy. The real Derpy's right here. No, that's not Derpy either. Derpy has gold eyes. No, wait, no, wait a second. How many Derpy recolors are there? In fact, I looked into this and people actually took notice of this and made fan art referencing this, which is awesome, but like, why? Anyways, Twilight first asks Rainbow Dash if she can help.
Right. No wings.
Well, not for 3 seasons at least. Twilight then spends the rest of the episode trying to help various roles, yet finds out that she's not good at anything.
There! It looks just like yours.
It's just a little rough around the edges. Let me lend you a hoof. Let's just untie this ribbon, and if we take out these sticks here, we shape.
You did a great job your first time around. I'm sure my first time was just as wobbly and bobbly and crash-horrific as yours. Really? No. Did I make you feel better?
You do realize that there exists such a thing called learning and improving, right?
Think of how much quicker they can wrap them winter with your magic.
No, no, no! I'm gonna find some other way that I can help out if it kills me!
Holy crap, is she acting like a huge baby. It's like the same thing I said about Look Before You Sleep. That perhaps the writers, or the studio, wanted to make Twilight literally know nothing so that we know as much as she knows and learn as much as she learns. Kinda like Curious George, where every episode starts with him doing something stupid about something he doesn't know and ending up learning a lesson at the end. You know, I actually might do a Curious George retrospective in the style of this video someday. Let me know if you'd like to see that. But once again, she's acting so childish and immature, which she wasn't doing in some episodes. Like, what the heck? Same with this interaction.
Well, see, I just wanted to... Oh!
Is this really the same Twilight from literally any other episode we've seen so far? Anyways, Twilight then notices that every time this town tries wrapping up winter, they're all disorganized, and the lesson she learns is that she could use her organization skills to help.
I know you all want to complete your jobs on time, but arguing is no way to go about it. What you need is... organization. And I'm just the pony for the job.
Once again, isn't it interesting how Mayor has a decent role size here?
We don't have time to argue. It's almost sundown. Spring is going to be late again. Another year of scandal and shame.
It's odd how it's not like she has a small appearance every few episodes, but it's more... she has a giant role in just enough early episodes to give us the impression that she'll have a recurring role in the show, but she doesn't. It's also kind of dumb how, despite the fact that I've been calling her Mayor this entire time, that name actually isn't said in the show until season 5. The name Mayor was said in a chapter book from the season 3 sessions and the card game, but in show she's just called Mayor, or something along those lines till season 5. But we all know her by Mayor, probably because the mobile game that everyone has calls her that. Unless if you're watching this so far scratching your head confused as to why I was calling her Mayor. But speaking of names, Rainbow Shine says,
Ditsy Doo accidentally went north to get the southern birds. Oh, that featherbrain! Didn't she learn her lesson last year when she went west?
And it's kind of funny how, if you look at this within the context of the fandom, this was Ask the Goddess Faust about Derpy.
In the first episode, there is a gray Pegasus with a blonde mane at Pinkie Pie's party with loopy eyes. Fans have dubbed her Derpy Hooves, and she's blowing up. I'm coming to this party a little late, but I was curious as to whether or not this pony had a name or not, and what her cutie mark represented.
With her response being,
Ha! I lurk around a bit and I noticed the Derpy phenomenon. As far as I know, her wall-eyed moment was an accident, or perhaps the layout artist entertaining him/herself. Who knows? Background ponies have no names and their butt symbols are picked at random, so she can be Derpy if everyone likes. A later episode references a less than intelligent local Pegasus named Ditsy Doo, so maybe she can be her if we ever need to show her. But I would not want to step on everyone's Derpy love.
So it's kind of cool to see something like this actually unfold in the show in real time. And while far less popular than the name Derpy Hooves, some people did end up referring to Derpy as Ditsy Doo.
I know a mayor, she knows me too. The stunning Derpy Hooves or Ditsy Doo.
The only issue with this is how Derpy is canonically called Derpy in season 2.
Now, careful, Derpy! I don't want to do any more damage than you've already done.
So who the heck is Ditsy Doo? Is this pony's name actually Ditsy Doo, and is Derpy Hooves perhaps a nickname? Or is there a completely different brain-dead Pegasus out there altogether? Are one of these ponies Ditsy Doo? But speaking of Derpy/Ditsy Doo, this episode also quote-unquote introduced this little pony, who got the fan name of Dinky, with the idea that she's Derpy/Ditsy's daughter or niece or something like that due to their color schemes kind of being similar, with her being called Dinky Doo or Dinky Hooves, depending on what you decide to call this pony. On a very similar note, this is also the episode where Dr. Hooves started as an idea. Looking at this old 4chan thread from before the episode aired, we get this random mention of Pony Time Lord, with this guy being interested in it, and with somebody posting this meme and other people chiming in with stuff like this. And while this pony has appeared in other episodes so far, he has had a 4-episode absence leading up to this one. So it makes sense why people would bring this up now, and to nobody's surprise, the fandom started calling this guy Dr. Hooves/Hooves, as a reference to how he looks similar to the 10th Doctor from Doctor Who, especially due to the time-related cutie mark. And because Dr. Hooves and Derpy Hooves share the same last name, I mean, once again, depending on how you spell it, people started shipping these two, with Dinky being their kid. It's kind of interesting how this entire family became a thing due to this one episode, though this whole dynamic does kind of get destroyed in future episodes, and can't really stay intact unless if you use a lot of mental gymnastics. But we'll get there when we get there. The lesson of the episode, though, I think this episode has a really good message. Like, just because you don't seem to fit in with anything doesn't mean that you don't have your own special skills. You just need to find what makes you special. Though, it's kind of dumb how the episode ends like this.
How's that, Spike? Spike? Oh, Spike.
Oh, Spike, how silly. Falling asleep on the job. How silly. Making me late for my assignment with the princess. How silly. This seems like something that Twilight would normally give Spike a beating over, but I guess she's just in a happier mood than usual. But that brings me to my overall point about this episode. Like I said, I think the only thing anyone really remembers about this episode is the song, and rightfully so, since the song is amazing. But without the song, all we're really left with is Twilight acting like a baby and expecting to be perfect for whatever new thing she's trying for the majority of the episode. Though, the thing is, when Season 1 originally aired, it did have this EI watermark, which stands for Educational and Informational, which would explain this whole bit about them literally almost breaking the fourth wall to explain what hibernation is.
Hope you had some wonderful dreams and restful hibernation. But it's time to get up now. Spring is coming.
What's hibernation?
It's like a long sleep. Animals often hibernate through the winter to save their energy and eat less food.
However, it does make sense to think that they ditched the whole EI thing because it was too constraining on the show's writing. And I wonder if the writers wanted to originally aim for a more educational show or if they were forced to. Because either way, making this more of an educational show would explain Twilight's odd characteristics in this episode and a few others where she's acting like this. Anyways, I should reiterate that it's not a huge deal that they don't have this all figured out from the start, but I want to take note of stuff like this as it happens. Especially when this isn't even a consistent thing throughout all the episodes. And it's not like this is just a quirk from the writer of the episode, Cindy Morrow, since her other episodes are tonally the same as the other episodes. I don't know, maybe I'm just tripping and seeing things that aren't there. Definitely comment your thoughts about this. I'm kind of just going crazy talking about ponies for 2.5 hours at this point. Overall, I thought the episode, while strange, was good and had a great message. Now, I'm not just saying this, I truly mean this. I believe that each and every one of you watching has a unique talent, and just because you don't fit into anything conventional doesn't mean that you can't think outside the box and show the world that you have something special. Like, back in high school, I barely had any prospects for anything in the future. Every day I was stressed about what kind of career path to take. I didn't seem to be good at anything. Like, even after high school, I originally wanted to get into becoming a therapist or criminologist. But after realizing that neuroscience bores the fuck out of me, I went into trades and took house inspection. But then I realized that I'm too much of a creator than I am a practical person. So I changed majors once again to English. But then I realized that college was a scam where personal ambitions go to die. So once again, I was very stressed and didn't think I had a future whatsoever. But then I thought outside the box and realized that I've acquired the skills over the years to create this channel, and everything that's happened in my life kind of all lined up for this channel to become a thing. And here you are watching this video where I'm talking about how all the stars lined up for you to be sitting there watching this video. Almost as if this is my message to the universe and the universe's message to you. And once again, I truly believe that all of you watching have a similar thing lined up like this that you just need to find. Whether it's a field of study or a business or what have you. So ultimately, I relate to this episode and I like the message. Good job for that. I just can't get over Twilight acting like a huge baby. It's like 100 steps forward and 100 steps back at the same time. The opening shot of this episode involves close-up shots of children's rear ends with a double combo of a teacher encouraging her children to stare at hers.
You can all see my cutie mark, can't you? Like all ponies.
So at least this episode has the show record of being the fastest to get me on some kind of FBI watch list. As if I'm not already on enough of those things for various different reasons.
Look at her hair.
Yes, I know, but honestly, that's how every pony was wearing their mane back then.
Though, instead of talking about your weird hair, you should talk about how your tail is glitching. It's strange how this one shot of Cheerilee became a meme due to its resemblance to Epic Face. Man, do I feel old bringing up Epic Face. Yet this is also the one shot where Cheerilee's tail is Fluttershy's tail. How does that even happen? It's normal before and after the shot. I sure do hope somebody got fired for that blunder. Anyways, we get an explanation for cutie marks, and while they tell and not show, which would normally bug me,
a cutie mark appears on a pony's flank when he or she finds that certain something that makes them different from every other pony.
I think the context of this being in a classroom is actually a really great excuse and works pretty well. Now, the only thing is quite interesting how they took almost half the season to explain what cutie marks are, and they left it as a huge elephant in the room for the first half of the season. Though, I guess that's more organic than introducing every little concept in episode 1 or whatever. My point is that this is a good scene. I like it. Since, like I said about Rainbow Dash's introduction, it's kind of jarring to have everything about something introduced all at once. Now, my only question is, how is there a globe here? How do they know what a planet is? I mean, presumably through telescopes, but do they also have spacecrafts to know this is how Earth looks? Anyways, this happens.
What?
Apple bloom. What could be so important that it couldn't wait until after class?
The fact that Shirley went quiet until she reprimands Apple Bloom makes it seem like she was silently watching what was going on. That makes the fact that she doesn't say anything about Diamond Tiara originally handing the note really stupid. If they had Shirley continue to say stuff in the background as this was going on, that would have made this less dumb, but speaking of dumb, when school is out, we saw 9 children in class, yet 6 plus 4 come out. 11 out of 10 counting skills. And on that topic, wow, nice to see that these children's parents don't pick them up or anything. Yeah, we live right next to a super dangerous forest with pony-eating creatures, but you're on your own, kid. And no, I'm not ignoring these two. We'll come back to their designs later. Anyways, the episode is basically about Apple Bloom, and to a lesser extent, Twist, being bullied by Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, since she don't got no cutie mark yet.
I don't know why we had to sit through a lecture about getting a cutie mark. We all have them already. I mean, almost all of us have them already. You're still totally invited to my cute Siniera this weekend. See you this weekend. Blank flanks.
Honestly, this makes me wonder, shouldn't Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon be going to a rich private school? Same with them and Equestria Girls. The heck are they going to a normal school for? Perhaps for the sake of plot, sure, but also perhaps because rich schools just don't exist in Ponyville? We'll come back to this later. So Apple Bloom tries doing a bunch of random things to force herself into getting a cutie mark, with her first idea being selling apples with Applejack. And here we get some cool things to dissect. First of all, we see Lyra talking to some random kid. Wait, I wonder what the context of this is. As fans, we can make headcanons about how Lyra and this kid are in some kind of big sister program, or she's babysitting, or something. What were the storyboarders and layout artists thinking when they did this? Was this supposed to be Lyra's kid, or sibling, or something? It's just that if she was talking to a similarly aged pony here, it's like, well, whatever, we can chalk it up to her talking to her friend. But it's just the fact that she's talking to a kid. There's definitely a story there that we're not seeing. Anyways, nice to see Apple Bloom destroying their profits and potentially dying. What the heck? Whatever, at least we get this legendary interaction.
There'll be 4 bits.
I didn't put those in my bag.
Which is pretty much one of the only things from Bon Bon we're going to be seeing for a while. Like, as much as Lyra and Bon Bon became a thing with lots of people shipping them or just liking their dynamic or appreciating their friendship or whatever, when push comes to shove, there is clearly a unanimous landslide on which half of the duo is more well-liked. Granted, the sample size here is 12, but I think the pattern is obvious. So it's cool seeing at least this one thing that separates her from being a part of this duo, where we get to see her doing things on her own. Also, it seems like Applejack ain't gonna be much help in Apple Bloom getting a cutie mark and selling apples, judging by how much she gives away for free. How are they gonna break even after this? But speaking of the background 6, it's cool to see Dr. Hooves also get a line.
Why not?
I have plenty at home.
Though there's a lot to dissect here as well. First of all, like I mentioned during the last episode, this would have been a little after Dr. Hooves was established to be a thing in the fandom, so having him be pointed out with a speaking role like this could have been a nod to those who are in the know, since staff of the show clearly lurked and interacted with the community on 4chan, which would make this pretty awesome. Though I'm not too sure if this was on purpose. On one hand, it is curious how they gave Dr. Hooves this line in particular, but a lot of fans that have seen the scene point out the fact that he wasn't given a British accent, when you'd expect that Dr. Who guy would have one.
Buy some apples.
I'm American.
If he was given one in the scene, it would clearly make it a reference, but the fact that they didn't makes it kind of seem like a coincidence. Though this could be another case of the whole Stephen Magnet situation with the card where they weren't allowed to be too on the nose with the fandom meme acknowledgements, so they just kind of gave a subtle wink instead. A potential clue that could sway this into just being coincidence is how if we look at Sibsy's storyboard for the episode, this scene apparently just called for a quote, male pony, meaning that Dr. Hooves' inclusion was arbitrary at best. Still, at least in the Korean dub of this episode, he says Dr. Who's catchphrase thingy. Anyways, Applejack tells Apple Bloom to f off, and this happens.
Twist doesn't have hers yet.
Do you think you'd feel better if you went to the party with her?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go.
Were they not initially planning on going with each other when they were basically only friends with each other in their entire class? But still, it turns out that Twist, in a cruel twist of events, in a real plot twist, it turns out that Twist has found her cutie mark. Some candy canes. Just as a side note, interesting how Twist lives in a flower-heavy household. Perhaps her family's made up of florists? If they are, I wonder how Twist learned about her talent in making candy canes. But speaking of pony families, it's kind of strange seeing this concept art of an average pony nuclear family, since we really don't see any in the actual show. There's something just oddly wholesome and comforting about this image, and it really is strange how stuff like this doesn't really appear in the show. Perhaps that was intentional, since real-life families aren't always like this, but it's interesting how we don't see a single instance of this at all, or at least at this point in the show. And most shots with an adult with a kid, like Lyra from earlier, are just incidental and nothing done on purpose to depict a family. Tangent aside, after getting roasted by the cool kids,
You're still gonna come to the party, aren't you? Of course she will. It's not like being the only pony there without a cutie mark will be like the most embarrassing thing ever.
Rainbow Dash takes Apple Bloom under her wing and tells her to try a whole bunch of stuff to increase her chances of finding a cutie mark.
The key here is to try as many things as possible as quickly as possible. One of them is bound to lead to your cutie mark.
Such as juggling, which, according to this video, is completely off.
Take, for example, this clip from Beauty and the Beast. You can clearly see a distinct throw and catch for each individual object. The eggs are believably affected by the movement of his hands, and moreover, Gaston is reacting to the pattern and moving his hands to catch the props where they land. On the flip side, you have something like this scene from My Little Pony, where you can tell that the character was animated first without any props, and then the balls were added in separately. See the discrepancies between how Apple Bloom's hands and the juggling balls are moving. There isn't a distinct throw and catch for each ball. They all kind of seem to have a mind of their own.
And also hang gliding, which almost kills her. That's dark. And also karate. Interesting how we never see this dojo in the rest of the series. It's also kind of funny how a few episodes ago, Spike said this.
Imagine me with a nice long Fu Manchu type beard.
Which is in reference to this type of facial hairstyling, which is clearly Asian, same with karate. That must mean that Asian ponies exist, which we later see do, which would furthermore imply that immigration exists in Equestria, which I guess they just travel by boats? But then the confusion arises when we actually see what kind of creatures live outside of Equestria in the movie, and any place outside of Equestria seems to be inhabited by different sapient species. So perhaps karate here was actually introduced to the ponies by a completely different species altogether, which would actually make more sense since the pose Apple Bloom makes here is unnatural for a pony to make. I know I'm looking way too deep into this one throwaway gag, but I'm just baffled at how they introduced this karate place without ever going back there ever again. I mean, I suppose there would be zero reason to, but it's such a unique location that detaches these early episodes with the rest of the show. It's also curious how when she goes roller derbying, we see these really weird pony designs. What the heck? Cool to see that these guys all have their own trading cards though. While sitting around, we get one of the most convenient appearances of Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon ever.
I love being special. Can you imagine how embarrassing it must be to be not special?
Like, huh? You would think with how often they happen to be walking by Apple Bloom, they're actually stalking her. Anyways, Pinkie also appears out of nowhere, and this happens.
You look like you'd be good at eating cupcakes.
Eating cupcakes? A cupcake eating cutie mark. It's so obvious.
I don't have any cupcakes, but you look like you'd be good at helping me make some.
I guess, making cupcakes cutie mark could work too.
You're telling me you'd rather have your talent be eating cupcakes rather than making cupcakes? How long do you expect to live with that being your special talent? But speaking of cupcakes, while nobody knows the exact date of when the fanfic Cupcakes was posted, it uses the phrase blank flank in it, which wasn't used until this episode, which clearly means that it was at least partly inspired by this episode in particular. And man, who would have thought this one scene with a cute little song about cupcakes
Cupcakes, so sweet and tasty cupcakes.
would have had someone turn this into a cannibalizing psychopath with a child apprentice. Anyways, then we get to what must be one of the most convenient appearances of Twilight in existence.
What's been going on in here?
What the f***? This scene kind of serves zero purpose, besides to show us that not even magic can produce cutie marks.
A cutie mark is something that a pony has to discover for herself.
What? Whereas if you're himself, you can get help with yours?
Yes! I knew you could do...
I wonder if this scene is redundant since we've already learned that you can't cheat your way to getting a cutie mark.
And no amount of hoping, wishing, or begging will make a cutie mark appear before its time.
But I'm also guessing if the scene wasn't in the episode, people would have started theorizing that you can magic cutie marks into existing. Oh, this is just a lose-lose situation when it comes to redundancy plus oddly convenient plot writing versus the risk of people making a wrong theory that could be solved with redundancy plus oddly convenient for the plot writing. But speaking of oddly convenient for the plot writing, we magically end up at Diamond Tiara's cute Sanira.
There's no way I'm going to that.
And while the shift is jarring, and they have to lampshade how jarring and nonsensical this is,
How could I have forgotten the time? How could I have forgotten Pinkie Pie was hosting the party? How could I have forgotten it was at Chicken Cube Corner?
there is a whole lot of detail to unpack here. First of all, if this guy's cutie mark is talking about how he's good at popping things, we should revoke it considering he tries popping balloons that aren't even there. What the f***? Secondly, this one shot. This one shot has so much behind-the-scenes lore hidden within. For starters, Berry Punch has a couple nicknames other than overly protective parent pony. She's also known as Berry Shine, but more importantly, Lauren Faust herself headcanoned her name to be
Pinot Noir,
based off her, quote,
drink of choice while working on MLP.
which means that she's based off this one specific alcoholic drink. And in order to cement the fact that she is, Sibsy had this to say.
I love Berry Punch. OMG. In that one episode with her by the punch bowl, she was supposed to burp, but it never got through. Haha. I always want to make her drunk. Stupid standards, lol. I put her there on purpose. I don't usually care which background pony I use, but in that case, it was thought out. Yeah, that was the reason I picked her out of the designs. Hee hee. As soon as I saw the grapes, I was like, she's the drinker. I'm glad it caught on, even though it kinda got cut out, haha.
Oh well, at least there's the drinking game site BerryTube if you want your own town drunkard pony fix.
After I heard about Twist, I was afraid he wouldn't show up.
When did Applejack learn about Twist? The only direct link from Twist to Applejack would be Apple Bloom. But we've been following Apple Bloom this whole episode, and there wasn't really time for them to catch up. But speaking of which, why are there a bunch of random adults at this party? We're basically to think that they're parents of the school ponies here, but on that note, where the fuck are Diamond Tiara's parents? Are they seriously not there for their own child's party? This was likely an oversight at the time, but her parents not being there is actually depressing in hindsight. Anyways, Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo show themselves and stand up for Apple Bloom, since they're also blank flanks.
You got a problem with blank flanks? The problem is, it means she's like totally not special.
And speaking of depressing, the lesson learned here is because these three don't have their cutie marks yet, they have a life full of potential to look forward to rather than being bogged down by one cutie mark for the rest of their lives.
They still get to experience the thrill of discovering who they are and what they're meant to be.
Which, like Winter Wrap-Up, is a great lesson, but only to an extent this time around. Since, how was everyone else at the party supposed to take this? Some kid even says,
Maybe I got my cutie mark too soon.
that's kind of depressing. Twilight just gave this poor child an existential crisis. Also, what the heck are Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo doing here? Judging by how they say this,
Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon drive us crazy.
they're not even on good terms, nor even in the same class as Diamond Tiara or Silver Spoon. So what the hell? Don't you worry a bit though, because every episode going forward will gaslight us into thinking that they are in the same class. One could argue that this school just has multiple classes, just like real life schools, and just because these individuals don't all share this one particular class together doesn't mean that they don't share other classes together. But if that's the case, wouldn't Apple Bloom already have known about these fellow blank flanks because they would have been in this class together?
What do you say we celebrate with some of these delicious cupcakes? Not the cupcakes. Trust me.
But that's clearly not the same cupcake that you baked earlier. That's not even the same as this one. Anyways, the episode ends with these three forming the Cutie Mark Crusaders Club, which is pretty cool.
What if the three of us work together to find out who we are and what we're supposed to be? We could form our own secret society. I'm liking this idea. We'll need a name for it, though. The Cutie Mark 3? The Cutastically Fantastics? How about the Cutie Mark Crusaders?
The odd thing about this is how TV Tropes claims that
The episode was a poorly disguised pilot for a spin-off series featuring the Cutie Mark Crusaders. It never surfaced, and instead the Crusaders more or less became the secondary protagonists after the main six.
And the thing is that I've always heard bits and pieces of a potential Cutie Mark Crusader spinoff, but I could never really find any direct sources of where this information even comes from. The most detail I could really find on this was a forum post that says,
No, it's not happening. Lauren Faust originally pitched a Cutie Mark Crusader spin-off that would have acted as an educational program, finding out how things are made and such with the CMC providing narration, but Hasbro wasn't interested. Too bad, because the concept was kinda cute.
with some other guy inquiring,
Do you have a link to where she mentions this? I'd love to read it.
just for the thread to die right after that question. 10 out of 10. Overall, despite having some questionable decisions and leaps in writing, this was a pretty solid episode. And like I kept saying, putting into motion some overarching plot lines, such as these three trying to find their cutie marks, is how you breathe some life into the universe, because that gives you some reason to come back to the show to see where the story goes. Though, while on the topic of the CMC, I'd imagine that Applejack was at this party to supervise her little sister, but by that logic, you'd imagine Rarity would also be there. But it's kind of interesting how Sweetie Belle isn't even revealed to be Rarity's sister till a few more episodes in, and I wonder if they had always planned that to be the case or what. Also, in the case of how these three just met for the first time in this episode, despite being huddled together in the very first episode, a layout artist for the show, Nayuki, was asked,
So, if Naimyo Moon is in the first episode, what are the CMCs doing there if they haven't met yet?
with the answer being,
I actually posted out that scene, so I guess it's my fault. I didn't know they hadn't met yet when I worked on it. Story time. When I get a scene, it comes with the storyboard, audio, and the characters/BG files needed. On this particular scene, the storyboard clearly had the CMC drawn there, but the characters sent to me weren't them. I assumed that I was just sent the wrong characters and matched the storyboard. I didn't realize until later that I was sent to different characters because of the events of the Call of the Cutie episode later in the season. Either way, the scene was approved and ended up playing out as a fun foreshadowing for our adventurous trio. To sum up, at first it was the CMC, then it was changed to not being them, then I changed it back. Derp.
I suppose that is certainly a thing that could happen. Well, at least we were introduced to Twist, who seems like she's going to be a good side character throughout the show. Like, even though the episode concluded with Apple Bloom making 2 new best friends, surely she's not just going to abandon her original best friend, right? But on that topic, back to these two, Archer, Bodkin, and Sun Glimmer. It's quite disturbing how they're literally just recolors of Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, with the latter taking the former's seats in class in future episodes, almost to rid them from existence. Terrifying. However, Archer at least found herself a job as the local ball retriever in the mobile game. Some people also know Archer as Scootaloo, but the game's files refer to as Archer, so I'll just call her that. But speaking of this class, the decision to make this the only school that we see in this world till far later in the show, I wonder if this actually says something about how the population of children in this universe ain't big enough to justify multiple schools or teachers here. But still, this episode served as good world building for explaining the importance of cutie marks and showing what life outside of the main six is like in Ponyville. But speaking of the main six, let's check up on how they're doing. Now, with almost every episode so far, I've been kind of just looking at everything from an impartial perspective and seeing where this information takes us. However, I actively do not like this episode. Try to catch on to see if you can tell why before I spell it out. The episode begins with Rainbow Dash and Applejack competing in a game while completely roasting each other to the point where you're led to ask why they're even hanging out together in the first place.
You think you're the top athlete in all of Ponyville?
Well, I was gonna say in all of Equestria, but...
Especially with this tail dusting. Damn, that's just like straight up murder. But on that note, interesting choice of wording here.
You think you're the top athlete in all of Ponyville?
When Rainbow Dash used this exact phrase a few episodes ago in a completely genuine way.
I mean, I thought I was working with Ponyville's best athlete.
If Applebuck season actually came after this episode, that would have been a really cool callback and also an excellent roast. But as the way it sits here, it's just a inconsistency.
I lost.
Anyways, since Rainbow Dash can't stand the thought of somebody beating her,
I hate losing.
she challenges Applejack to the Iron Pony competition to see who's more athletic.
A series of athletic contests to decide who's the best once and for all.
And no, Rainbow Dash acting petty and like a child is not why I don't like this episode. I honestly find this behavior pretty cute. And yes, there is a difference between Rainbow Dash acting like a baby, which is cute, versus Twilight acting like one, which is disgusting. So save your comments. Like what, you ask? Well... Oh, hey, look, their synchronized head turn is funny. Anyways, the games begin and... Well, you see, aren't Earth ponies supposed to be naturally stronger? That means that if you're an Earth pony and there's a non-Earth pony going toe-to-toe with you in a strength match, you already lost where it matters. Let's get something straight. You can win the hammer thing, but not arm wrestling. Sure, different muscles go into those activities, but does that mean that Applejack skips working out her wrist and forearms? Why am I talking about their anatomy as if they're human? But speaking of horse anatomy, Rainbow Dash starts cheating via using wings. Or at least it's portrayed as cheating, and it's called cheating.
You can't use your wings to held your wings, huh? You're cheating.
However, like I said, Earth ponies are seen throughout the show to be naturally physically stronger, as the wiki even puts it.
Earth ponies also do most of the manual labor, such as scoring ice and clearing snow. In other episodes, Earth ponies are shown pulling rickshaws, carriages, and even trains, suggesting natural physical ability. In more extreme cases, Earth pony characters are shown accomplishing remarkable physical feats such as pulling entire houses across the landscape or easily breaking through barricades.
Therefore, I'd say Rainbow Dash using her natural abilities, just as Applejack was presumably using, is more than fair. If not, then interracial competitions like this will literally be lopsided and yield inconclusive results. But speaking of which, throughout this competition, we get plenty of Spike abuse.
Why me?
Go!
Whoa!
Ouch. Ready for another pony ride?
No.
Rainbow Dash wins the Bronco Buck.
And I lose.
Which has me wondering, why is Spike even in the show at this point? When not being used as a plot device to help Twilight send messages to Princess Celestia, he literally has zero role besides to either spout roasts every 2 seconds or to be a human punching bag. And it makes me question what the writers' intentions with this were. I have a couple theories as to why, one of which being that seeing this is a show made for, contrary to popular belief, little girls. And they may have wanted to have like a recurring boys are icky gig, which would also explain Applejack's comment from earlier.
Well, wallop my wither, Spike. Isn't that just like a boy? Can't handle the least bit of sentiment.
Which would seem to line up since he's like the only recurring male character at this point and most of his scenes involve him being the butt of the joke. Either that or they had no idea what to do with him at this point besides putting him in whatever situation they could without much of a direction or own identity. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just thought this was a very unique position for a character to be in.
I win by a landslide. Or mudslide in your case.
Roasted! Anyways, to settle this happens.
Prove it.
Gladly. How?
Tomorrow's the annual running of the leaves. I challenge you to race me.
That must be one of the most convenient timing of the running of the leaves in existence. Also, strange how Applejack didn't bite Rainbow Dash's tail this time. Back to Spike though. I guess as a way to give him some character, they decided to make him want to be the sports announcer.
Why are you so excited about the race? It's only for ponies.
Yeah, but I'm hoping I can be the announcer again.
Getting disappointed when seeing that Pinkie's already beat him to the punch, with Pinkie cheering him up by doing the announcing together.
Pinkie Pie?
Hey, Spike! What's up? Oh, wait, it's me. I'm up.
I was just wondering.
What?
Forget it.
Would you like to be my co-reporter? We could comment on the action together.
It seems like this may have been the writers slightly acknowledging that Spike as a character may be wasted potential, and this is actually meta commentary, suggesting that Spike could be, and wants to be, so much more than what he's stuck with. However, the only way he could really have any time in the spotlight is when he's bouncing off of other pony characters. Or not, I might be looking too far into this, it's just still an observation I made that kind of seems to make sense. So we learned that just as ponies have to manually change seasons like we saw a couple episodes ago, ponies have to also physically let autumn leaves fall off trees. Now, if you're thinking, but winter comes after fall, has almost an entire year elapsed between one episode? Well, I guess this was a pretty common complaint since Goddess Faust explained this away.
The episodes are currently airing in production order. I really have no excuse for what people may consider to be a confusing timeline, except that we're making these shows pretty darn fast. And if we're not about to throw out a good premise and replace it with a meh one, because of it may seem out of order. It may make more sense for everyone to imagine that episodes like Fall Weather Friends in reality happened before winter wrap-up. The logic on our end was that we needed to inform the audience of the world dynamics, that the ponies control the weather, early in the season. If we didn't have the more solid explanation in Winter Wrap-Up first, Fall Weather Friends may have been more confusing, or we would have had to waste a lot of time in Fall Weather Friends explaining that stuff.
Which really does confirm that this season has out-of-order episodes, and the reason given makes a lot of sense, but I'm glad they didn't have to, quote, waste a lot of time in this episode explaining stuff, since that time was allocated to all these roasts instead.
Make way for the Iron Pony.
The Iron Phone.
Though, as Pinkie and Spike's commentary get more lively, my commentary kinda dies down, since as for everything afterwards, there's not much to really break down, since most of the race is composed of pretty straightforward visuals with Rainbow Dash and Applejack arguing and accusing each other of cheating, rather than any particularly deep interactions worthy of psychoanalysis. However, I did want to point out how these Rainbow Dash clones are kind of disgusting. I mean, that's pretty much the rest of the episode. Applejack and Rainbow Dash being unpleasant towards each other until the end where we get a surprise visitation from Princess Celestia,
Princess Celestia?
who looks very stupid from the front. I guess it's always a thing 2D animators have to struggle with, since most default poses of characters are at a 45-degree angle, so when they do have to draw them from the front, it ends up looking very goofy. Though I'm sure a lot of these examples people post everywhere were drawn goofy on purpose, since, you know, they were drawn by hand, frame by frame. But still, I like how when the default pose of the characters are the front angle, like South Park, they end up looking goofy from the side. So I guess there's just no escaping the wrath of that. The reason I mention all that is because in this other shot of Celestia's front angle, she somehow looks normal, so what gives? But still, yeah, sure, give us an episode about how two of the main characters we're supposed to grow attached to don't get along and do petty challenges and accuse each other of cheating, especially this early into the show's run, when we're not even halfway through season number 1. That's honestly my main gripe with this episode. The episode would have been fine if it just involved either Rainbow Dash or Applejack going against some other random character not in the main 6, like what they did with Gilda. But as it stands, it's just like watching my parents fight. Plus, inserting some random competitive athletic pony would have been the perfect opportunity to do some good world building with other citizens of Ponyville this early on. I'm not sure if we're even supposed to be rooting for one of these ponies, or if we're supposed to see both of them in the wrong, or what. But either case involves causing a rift between the audience and at least one pony out of 6 that we're supposed to be getting attached to. And the only time they do get along, besides kind of at the beginning, is at the very end. But that seems so forced in order to return everything back to the status quo and nothing genuine. They also get along when they're roasting Twilight.
You're not an athlete, you're an egghead. I am not an egghead, I am well-read. Egghead.
Have you ever run a race?
No, but I do know a lot about running. And do you know this from books?
What'd you read?
The Egghead's Guide to Running. Did you stretch out your eye muscles to warm up? See you at the finish line tomorrow.
Another member of the main 6 we're supposed to be growing attached to. So, However, like I said time and time again, at least this episode does have some skull emoji worth roasts. And from just a straight humor perspective, and divorced from the context of where we are at the show as a whole, I can appreciate this as its own thing. I guess there's also some kind of meta humor when you realize that the majority of this episode is just Ashley Ball roasting herself back and forth. I'm sure this episode was one sexy payday for her. But anyways, these characters act so petty, which obviously an episode of a show needs this tiny little thing called conflict in order to have this little thing called plot. But did this episode in the first half of season 1 really have to try dividing the audience on choosing sides? There's an episode way later down the line that's pretty much a repeat of this episode, and we will get to that when we do. And despite being the lowest rated episode of the show on IMDb, I still think that episode has a better setup to the whole Applejack and Rainbow Dash are competitive towards each other plot, since that episode shows how outside characters react to that dynamic, and how it affects others, which actually gives the episode something of a message. What we get in this episode is them like fighting towards each other. At the very least, I suppose this episode kind of gave some of the main 6 a bit more depth in character, but then again, that's pretty much inevitable when you have, like, I don't know, an episode with characters. And if you didn't catch on, I'm pretty much just repeating the same 2 points over and over again. But that's only because those 2 points are basically the entire episode. Maybe I'm being irrational and you think that it shows something interesting I'm not picking up on. Let me know what you think. Oh hey look, our first Rarity solo episode. Did the very first Rarity-centric episode give us good first-ish impressions? Let's find out. The episode begins with Rarity asking her cat, Opalescence,
Can't you just picture it? Moi, stepping out in a stunning new gown at the Grand Galloping Gala in Canterlot.
What? The Grand Galloping Gala in Canterlot? Well, as opposed to the Grand Galloping Gala in Rockersville, Virginia? Thanks for specifying. That's such a clunkily worded sentence. I get the rhetorical reason the sentence is worded like that is to tell the audience that this event is taking place at a certain location, more specifically to convey that the fact that there's going to be a fancy party at a fancy location. But this is kind of dumb since the in Canterlot part of the sentence only has any weight whatsoever if you already know that Canterlot is a regal place. If you've seen the episode The Ticketmaster prior to this one, like intended, you already know that the gala will be taking place in a fancy place called Canterlot. Whereas if this actually is the first episode of the show you're watching, that you're catching on TV or whatever, this is super unnecessary information that only makes her dialogue sound clunky and unrealistic. Then again, I guess Rarity is Rarity and might impress the fact that it's in Canterlot just because she's Rarity, but the tone of the line indicates that that's kind of an afterthought.
Down at the Grand Galloping Gala in Canterlot.
If she had emphasized it more like, the Grand Galloping Gala, ... in Canterlot, it would have had a better flow to it. I know the only thing more unnecessary than the last part of that sentence is me ranting about the last part of that sentence, but still! Also, nice to see that Rarity uses glue, apparently. Guess we better put those pony corpses to use besides forming marshmallows and rainbows with them. It's kind of funny how somebody actually asked about this in the September 2011 Q&A with Jason Thiessen.
What kind of question is that? That's terrible. You get it from the store like everyone else.
But on a more positive note, it's nice to see that we're getting a continuation of the Grand Galloping Gala storyline. I tried looking into old threads and forum posts to see how people reacted to this information back then. Like, did people expect the show to actually follow through continuity like this? Or were they surprised that things actually continue through episode? I'm pretty sure it kind of blew my brain away when I watched the show for the first time that they're actually doing callbacks, but I guess we'll never know since the only conversation anyone really seems to want to have about this episode are about the song, a certain line of dialogue, and a new background pony getting introduced. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So Rarity basically almost kills Opal. And can we get a consensus on this in the comments? Do you guys even like Opalescence? I personally think she's weird and gross, and I'd gladly put her down with my own 2 hands given the opportunity. So wait, did I say opportunity? I meant to say opaltunity. Twilight and Applejack somehow walk into Rarity's room, much to her annoyance, leading us to assume that locking your doors isn't a concept that exists in this world. The reason they're here being that Twilight wants her old dress fixed up for the gala, which might be the stupidest coincidence ever, seeing that Twilight had a request for something Grand Galloping Gala related, while Rarity was doing something Grand Galloping Gala related. On top of that, I wonder what Applejack is even doing here. She literally says she doesn't want anything from Rarity.
Let me guess, Applejack. You don't want a new gown either.
Shoot, I was just gonna wear my old work duds.
Are we to assume that Twilight stopped by Applejack's place on her way to Rarity's? The part that baffles me the most is how Twilight brings up this dress that she's had for a while, presumably since she's lived in Canterlot. Judging by how when she moved over to Ponyville, she didn't have a bag or anything, are we to assume that Twilight went over back to her old house just to look for this dress, just to bring it over to Rarity? If so, did Applejack take along to Canterlot, or did Twilight make her journey all the way over to Canterlot and go to Applejack's? You get the point. But before we can get to the bottom of that, Rainbow Dash conveniently shows up. It's one thing if Rainbow Dash walked into this boutique or said something about hearing her friend's voice from outside, but it's the fact that her reasoning is...
Sorry, new trick. Didn't quite work.
Like, back to Applejack, they obviously only put her here with Twilight because they couldn't think of any other justification for her to come over here on her own. And as with Rainbow Dash, they just came up with a ridiculous excuse because whatever. But I like how they didn't even attempt to get Fluttershy and Pinkie in the scene. Still, Rarity insists on making dresses for all her friends the same so they can have a fashion show to advertise Rarity's business.
Oh, and when I'm done, we can hold our very own fashion show. It'll be a wonderful boost for my business. Plus, fun.
Anyways, this leads us into our first non-Pinkie solo song. Though, before we actually talk about the song itself, I should just ask this before I lose the chance to. Isn't it stupid how, for a pony as popular as Rarity, the only people she seems to be friends with is the main 6? Is that she has no other friends, or is it the fact that she thinks she's too good to hang out with anyone who isn't the main 6? Despite the fact that she doesn't even get along with some of them. Anyways, I think I like the song.
Thread by thread, stitching it together.
Musically, it's good. Though the lyrics are so matter-of-fact to the point where it doesn't really even seem like a song, more of just a list of what's going on. Perhaps they only made all this a part of a song because it would have been incredibly difficult to make the process of dressmaking into a fun plot.
Do you think it looks cheesy?
Do you think it looks cheesy? I think these lyrics are cheesy.
Couldn't you just simply die?
Well, your wish is my command. Anyways, Rarity finishes all the dresses and makes the grand reveal to her friends, but none of them seem to like theirs. You're telling me all 5 of them happen to not be content with theirs, and that this is such an overwhelmingly unanimous opinion that they all clued into that fact without saying a word? Are we, as the audience, also supposed to find these dresses bad? If so, do I just have really bad fashion sense since I think these look fine? Twilight's dress looks like it would suit Trixie better than Twilight, but still, that's not really a point on whether I find the dresses ugly or pretty. Like, I mean, are we supposed to find these dresses pretty with the point here being that the main 6 are super entitled and have bad fashion senses themselves? I mean, if you thought that this was good enough to wear to the gala, you cannot be talking about what dress looks pretty or not. Well, we'll come back to this later. The more important point to make here is how Pinkie references Elf 2003.
They sure are, something.
Yes! Something. I love something. Something is my favorite.
Why are you smiling like that?
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
This wouldn't even be worth pointing out if it weren't for the fact that later down in the show, there exists a pony version of Buddy the Elf. I don't know what to make of this, and my mind can't wrap myself around it, so let's just move on.
Not a problem. There's plenty more where that came from. They were only a first pass.
Well, in that case, thank you again, Rarity.
What have I gotten myself into?
Rarity insists on remaking the dresses to appease her friends, which is stupid. I'm not calling Rarity stupid, I'm calling this entire thing stupid. First of all, holy crap, are these the most entitled ponies in existence? Your friend clearly looks unwell from making all these unique dresses completely for free, and your first instinct is to be ungrateful for it?
I guess what we're all saying is that they're just not what we had in mind. Yeah!
Wow, that might actually be a reference to me. How I pull all-nighters and get sleepless nights. And how I sit in front of my computer for hours at a time instead of going outside. Just to put in passion, hard work, and effort into all my videos. Just for people to insult me in the comments. Anyways. They realize that while these dresses are for them to wear to the gala, Rarity is making them mainly for the fashion show, which will reflect on her business, right? We'll come back to this as well. To remake their dresses, Rarity consults her friends one-on-one, starting with Fluttershy. And I think this scene is a good case study into why I don't like Fluttershy. The entirety of Dragonshy aside, Fluttershy says this.
I love it.
Oh, you're just saying that.
No, I do. It's nice.
Lying through her teeth. It's only after Rarity presses heartily on her that she spills her true feelings about her dress.
The arm size tight, the midi collar doesn't go with the shawl lapel, the hems are clearly machine stitched, the pleats are uneven, the fabric looks like toile.
Now, to some of you, this may be seen as cute or whatever, but to me, this seems disingenuous. To give her the benefit of the doubt, she acts like this because she isn't confident about speaking up due to social anxiety and all that fun stuff. I get that, okay? I really do. I've been there for the better part of my whole life. But it's just that when she does speak up here, she is confident and knowledgeable about what she's actually talking about.
Used a back stitch here when it clearly called for a top stitch or maybe a traditional blanket stitch, and the over-design is reminiscent of prêt-à-porter and not true French haute couture.
I get that's the joke, that she's being out of character here, but the addition of...
whatever you want to do is fine.
At the end, seems like a huge middle finger after giving that speech. From this, Rarity starts a reprise of her song from earlier, but with dialogue exchanged in between verses this time, with Pinkie saying...
Streamers!
Whose dress is this?
It sounds so passive-aggressive and authoritative and entitled, with how pissed off she looks here. Once again, Pinkie, you do realize that this is supposed to be for Rarity's fashion show, right? And yes, that's obviously the point of the episode, that Pinkie represents those who criticize things without having any idea of the labor and work that goes into creation. Nothing wrong with wanting to tell a story with that message, and yes, we will discuss the entire meta message of this episode in a bit. My question for now is why we needed to have the main 6 be in that place, opposed to a character we're actually not supposed to like. At least we get the birth of this legendary line.
It needs to be about 20% cooler.
Is this really such a zinger line that it was deserving of being the topic of a billion unescapable memes back in the day? I'm not sure, but it's like such early 2010s internet lingo, and I love it. I want to inject these kind of images into my veins more than they already are. So Rarity unveils the new dresses, with the clients all loving it, and Spike shows up for the first time in the episode to reveal that he got hoity-toity to attend Rarity's fashion show. Hoity-toity in question being this, quote,
bigwig fashion hotshot in Canterlot?
So, how did Spike get the opportunity to talk to him? Or is that not a good question, since the answer is basically he'd do anything, no matter how difficult, in order to simp for Rarity? Anyways, nice to see that Rarity cares about Opal enough to bring her along to the fashion show, while also simultaneously not caring about her to the point where she dips from the show and never makes a prominent appearance ever again. Though at this fashion show, we see that this particular pony is in charge of providing music. Alright, so turntables and mixers and speakers exist, yet in the first episode they wanted birds to be the one providing music. That makes sense if Princess Celestia prefers live bird music rather than DJ music or live pony music, but does that mean that bird is a separate genre in this world? Anyways, the main 6, sans Rarity, goes up on stage to do their show, and it's very unusual Fluttershy is up on stage. Getting Fluttershy to go up on stage and act as confident as she is here seems like a plot of an episode all on its own. Though introducing Fluttershy's stage fright in this episode would have obviously made everything much more unfocused, so I get why they didn't make a big deal out of it, but it's still incredibly out of character. Also, judging by how Lyra's horn is supposed to look like this just looks like this horn belongs to whoever's behind her. She looked normal in the previous shot, so what gives? Now she has no horn at all? Because these dresses look weird, Hoity-Toity doesn't seem to like them. Then we get this gag.
Oh, those amateurish designs look like a piled-on mishmash of everything but the kitchen sink.
This seems like a very cartoony and surrealist joke, which, from my memory, doesn't really seem like something that would be carried on to the later seasons. Aside from Pinkie gigs, but that's different. Well, it seems like everybody is extra clueless in this episode, since Spike does this.
Yes! Alright! Go Rarity!
While Rarity is clearly distraught. Rarity then becomes a recluse for days.
You haven't come out for days!
I'm never coming out!
With the way they get her out being that they kidnap her cat to put her life on the line.
Opal, how did you get up there? Hang on, you poor dear. Mama's coming! How dare you strand my poor Opal in a tree?
Well, how else were we gonna get you out here to show you this?
Which I would normally be able to excuse since it's been established that Rarity doesn't lock her house from earlier. But I can't look past the fact that Rarity seemed to be very attached to Opal, to the point of talking to her whilst doing activities, but all of a sudden she doesn't want to be with her in the time of sadness? Wouldn't you think, if anything, Rarity would want to lock herself up in her room with Opal? Anyways, the main 6 show Rarity this new dress they made using Fluttershy's expertise.
We all finished your dress for you!
Thanks to Fluttershy's freaky knowledge of sewing.
Which is stupid, since Fluttershy has both the knowledge and talent to make a dress that impresses Rarity, an actual fashionista who makes dresses for a living. Why the f didn't she just make her own rather than being super picky towards Rarity? Somehow, Hoity-Toity was convinced to give Rarity's fashion another chance, to which he is pleased by this time, offering her to feature her dresses in his boutique. And to focus on the positives for a bit, I actually really like the presentation of these dresses here. I know I'm speeding it up quite a bit just so I can actually fit it all over my dialogue here, but it seems like it would have taken a while to storyboard and animate, so that's nice. The lesson Twilight sends off to Princess Celestia is...
This week, my very talented friend Rarity learned that if you try to please every pony, you oftentimes end up pleasing no pony.
Well, it seemed to please the friend group. Now that we got the episode out of the way, let us dig into some metatextual analysis. This panel/interview with Charlotte Fullerton, the writer of this episode, gives us some good insight.
I want to ask a specific question about Suited for Success. I've done multiple interviews with a lot of different production staff members, and almost every one of the storyboarders I've spoken to and a lot of the artists I've spoken to, that's their favorite episode of season 1. And the reason why is that they feel like it kind of reflects how they feel as artists. You know, poor Rarity tries to put in her best effort, and everybody comes in and edits and tweaks.
Lauren and Rob Renzetti and I said that in the room. As we got to that point in the script when the reprise of the song, and she's freaking out and having to make all these changes. Like, wow, this is a little thinly veiled. Our own frustration with, and somebody was just talking to me about that earlier today, in their own profession that has nothing to do with writing animation, and they deal with clients doing that. And do you make the changes they say they want, even though it's going to wreck things, or it's not necessarily even going to improve them one way or another? It's just pointless time and money wasting changes. Like, do you do that regardless of your profession? So that's cool that you guys actually caught that.
This is made even more clear if we look at the lyrics of what the main six, aside from Rarity, sing in the song. Clearly, all of this is along the lines of what the showrunner / censorship board / company will tell you, when they want you to change this idea that you thought would be perfect before giving it the go-ahead, as long as we're happy with it, without the consideration of how it may reflect on the audience or the creator themselves. In that context, this episode seems to carry more personal and meaningful weight than other episodes so far, which is nice. Which is awesome. Even if the line makes no sense in the context of the episode, since the ponies singing that line are Rarity's friends when they're not the ones spending money on the dress material, nor labor costs. But it's obviously an example of what your superiors are likely to tell you when creating something for a network. This is why when we were talking about the pilot and Dragonshy and stuff like that, I hammered on the point of Lauren Faust's original vision that she had for the show before actually being picked up by the network, to see where this episode in particular might have been coming from. But I guess we'll see more of that as we go on. Ms. Fullerton also gives us lore on the 20% cooler line.
You said the word cool a moment ago, and there's a very famous phrase in the fandom that comes from that episode. Were you the writer of it needs to be 20% cooler?
Yeah, I'd love to take credit for that because I love that line, but I really think either Lauren or Rob said it during the story meeting just as a funny thing, and I wrote it down and then put it in the song. Like, I think it wasn't necessarily supposed to be the line of dialogue during that spoken part of the song, but yeah, I think it was just one of those spitballing things with, this would be funny to say, this would be funny to say. I'm like, ooh, I know where I can put that. I'm just sort of jotting down.
You could take credit for it if you wanted to.
I could, but I can't remember which one of them said it, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't me. I wish. I came up with other stuff.
And all of this is interesting, but this is unfortunately also where I have to bring up some of the same basic criticism I had about the last episode. Why, especially this early into the show, would you make all the conflict be based on the main characters we're supposed to be growing attached to? Obviously, if you were to tell me to, I don't know, list the top 5 words that come to mind when describing, say, Pinkie Pie, you wouldn't list entitled. So clearly, this was all an instance of them writing these characters to be out of character for the sake of creating a plot and conflict, which is stupid. If we're at that point, why couldn't we just make the episode involve ponies outside of the friend group so it wouldn't matter if they were entitled? But surely, if you didn't want the main 6 to be unlikable, the main chunk of this episode could have involved some other snobby / entitled clients. And after the climax of the episode, the main 6 could have seen how much of a hard worker / good dressmaker / etc. Rarity is. They could have then ended the episode with them asking her to make the dresses. Is that a perfect fix? No, especially because then the 20% cooler line wouldn't exist. I'm really just trying to brainstorm ideas to mend how cluelessly entitled everyone is here. Like, Griffin the Brush-Off worked well because it wasn't a member of the main 6 bullying another. Plus, using other characters aside from the main 6 sort of enhanced world building, but that's a whole separate topic. But we shall revisit all these complaints later. For now, we gotta explore some religious allegories instead. Oh boy, get ready for our first truly controversial episode. The premise of this episode is pretty straightforward. Pinkie claims to have these signs from her body that indicate what's about to happen, dubbed the Pinkie sense.
The twitching means my pinky sense is telling me that stuff's gonna start falling. You two better duck for cover.
Oh, Pinkie, it's not gonna rain. Why, there's barely even a cloud in the thing.
Yet, Twilight tries finding a scientific explanation for all that instead.
Pinkie Pie predicted something would fall, and it did!
She said something would fall, and a frog just happened to fall right around the same time. A coincidence. Nothing else to it.
Yeah, I'm sure you can draw this to some parallels to real-life debates. Though, we shall get back to that much more detail later.
I get different little nickly...
Just because you later go on to do blackface twice doesn't mean that you can go around saying stuff like that. At least we get possibly one of the best character introductions in existence.
But my shoulder's achy. That means there's an alligator in the tub.
That's so random, and the fact that Gummy isn't just a one-time character makes this really awesome. Though the interesting thing about Gummy is how, like we saw, Applejack was packaged with his dog, who is her pet in the show, and Fluttershy was packaged with his bunny, who is her pet in the show. It seems like an odd decision to not give Pinkie a mouse pet in the show, but instead to give her this alligator, let alone one without any teeth. Hey, who comes up with stuff like that? That seems so random, but it ultimately is a much better choice, mostly because the color scheme of Pinkie and Gummy is so much better than Pinkie and this mouse who's been retroactively erased from existence. But speaking of color schemes, isn't it kind of disturbing how our two reptilian companions, Spike and Gummy, are essentially the same colors just with their skin and eye colors flipped? I had to be cursed with this knowledge, so you do too now. Anyways, while Pinkie speaks of her Pinkie sense, we get this visual gag of Twilight standing atop this literal soapbox to say this.
Magic is something you study and practice. It only happens when you decide to do it. With you, it makes no sense at all.
Now, if you don't know what soapbox means exactly, Google defines it as
a box or crate used as a makeshift stand by a public speaker.
And
a thing that provides an opportunity for someone to air their views publicly.
Or as vocabulary.com puts it more colloquially,
on a soapbox has become a metaphor for expressing very strong opinions about a topic. If you lecture your meat-loving family about vegetarianism again, they might tell you to shut up and get off your soapbox.
All this to say that what Twilight said here is of some meta significance. Though the confusion arises amidst the ambiguity of whether the soapbox is signifying what Twilight is saying to Pinkie or what the show is saying to us. As in, this soapbox could have been put here to mock Twilight as a character or to mock the real-life equivalent of the argument that she's making here. I can't tell. But once again, we'll get back to the message of this episode later, and the only reason I pointed this out was because it was obviously a deliberate decision to mean something. Twilight brings in Pinkie to conduct experiments on her in the basement of the treehouse, which apparently exists and is never brought up ever again. Well, that's not terrifying at all. I wonder if any grimdark fanfiction will be written based on this. Ha 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 ha. The next chunk of the episode involves Twilight stalking Pinkie around town to observe her supposed supernatural powers. One such case being Pinkie rolling around like this on elementary school premises. Okay, so she's allowed to do this, but when I go to my local elementary school and start rolling around on the playground like this, I get the cops called on me. Another case being Twilight stalking Pinkie near Applejack's farm, and this happens.
I promise you there's nothing to fear from that.
Twilight, you came to visit my new apple cellar.
Hey, who opened the cellar door? If we had Applejack pop out, or if they animated like a nail bouncing out, that would have fixed everything, but there's nothing in sight. This is scary. But speaking of which, visually, the background landscapes in the show have been getting so much better, yet they feel more empty than ever since we're seeing so many locations, yet the only characters roaming about just happen to be Twilight, Spike, and Pinkie. Or at least until we get this gag.
You're overreacting.
Which, obviously, the whole anvil on head trope is definitely Looney Tunes-esque. More specifically, Roadrunner-esque. Same with Pinkie's scientific name here.
I'm observing Pinkie Pie. Scientific name? Pinkius Piacus.
Which probably is a reference to how every Roadrunner episode starts with a gag like this, which I bring up because that's totally the same style of humor and overall vibe that the test pilot had, and the whole premise and plot of the two are similar as well. Though speaking of which, after episodes of Derpy's eyes being normal, for the lack of a better word, the crew finally gave in to Derpy's reputation in the fandom and decided to give her these goofy eyes instead. Plus, the fact that she apparently has a job at a moving company was likely a reference to the fandom's depiction of her being a male mayor at the time, so that's pretty neat. Pinkie then says that there's going to be a doozy at the bog Fluttershy is heading to.
It's a doozy. Something you never expect to happen is gonna happen. And it's gonna happen at Froggy Bottom Bog!
Where they all get chased around by this Hydra. A Hydra that will never show up ever again for the rest of the show's run. There's so much cool fan art of it, plus it's on the season 1 poster, yet it appears never again in the entire show. I suppose there ain't much story you could tell with this guy, but that's a shame since it actually looks pretty cool. Though, something we can and do remember this scene for is this angle Twilight finds herself in.
See what's behind you, Twilight!
Which is where this "that's not friendship" image that gets posted around everywhere comes from.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Wow, nice to see Fluttershy leaving this frog to die. That was necessary. At least we get this callback.
A hop, skip, and a jump! There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump. See?
That's pretty cool. Good job. Anyways, interesting how Twilight says,
What would a brave pony like Rainbow Dash do?
the funny thing is, at this point in the show, I'm not sure what Rainbow Dash has really done for Twilight to see her as the brave type necessarily. And a part of me just sees this as them breaking show don't tell in the sense of the writers trying to get us to subconsciously associate bravery as a part of Rainbow Dash's character. But on the other hand, it's sweet to see what Twilight thinks of her friend, which shows us some genuinely nice development from her attitude towards the concept of being around other ponies from the first episode. Anyways, this happens. Is this a Rapidash reference? Either way, Twilight concedes that she can't explain everything away with science and logic.
I give up. I can't fight it anymore. But Pinkie's sense somehow makes sense. I don't see how it does, but it just does.
Which turns out to be the doozy that Pinkie was talking about earlier.
That's the doozy! What is? You believing! I never expected that to happen!
Still, now that we're at the end of the episode, let us hear what the lesson is.
Spike, what have I been saying about focus?
Oh, I don't know, since you let him sleep through one of your other lessons before?
There are wonderful things in this world you just can't explain, but that doesn't necessarily make them any less true. It just means you have to choose to believe in them.
Interesting. Somebody actually asked this away on Goddess's DeviantArt.
There has been much debate and confusion about the moral of feeling Pinkie keen. People are reading into it too deeply and interpreting it to be anti-intellectual, anti-skepticism, pro-religion, and so forth. Personally, I think it's both the first two and also not, and accepting that there are phenomenons that cannot be explained similar to theories or educated guesses, taking it at face value since there are some things that are impossible to completely explain or rationalize. Would you help shed some light, whether it be the intended lesson or perhaps your own interpretation?
With her responding with,
"Oh geez, I don't know if I want to open this particular can of worms. I can't speak for others who work on this episode, but from my perspective, it's kind of like you said. There are simply phenomena that are difficult to explain, and I'm of the opinion that faith can apply to more things than just religion. For instance, are we alone in the universe, or is there life on some other planet somewhere? We don't have convincing evidence that aliens exist, but it takes faith to say that it's not possible at all. I've heard some pretty heated debates from smart people regarding certain cases of cryptozoology. In the end, if there is an idea we explore that leads us to inconclusive answers, we are left with a choice. Believe it anyway, reject it, or wait for more answers. Obviously rather deep for our audience, I know, and obviously up to lots and lots of interpretation. Maybe it was a mistake. Honestly, we started the process with the concept of Pinkie having that old-fashioned cliche, knees achy, it's gonna rain, Twilight not buying it, and the humor we thought came out of that. BTW, I'm not sure if I'm going to regret putting in my 2 cents on this one, so if my replying to this starts flame wars or invites trolls, I'm going to delete it. I really like having discussions with viewers, but I've been getting more nervous about it of late.
Interesting how that says both a lot and so little all at the same time. What this comment essentially boils down to is, the episode isn't just about religion. Put a pin in that for a sec. Firstly, I think the confusion comes from how the word faith can be interpreted in 2 ways, and the wording of this post reads like Goddess Faust was either unaware of that or just didn't articulate it properly, judging by the fact that she thinks that it's an opinion that faith can apply to more things than just religion, rather than stating it as a fact that there are multiple definitions of the word faith. This seems to me like the accidental use of equivocation where one word has different definitions, so you end up confusing people from the ambiguity. One definition of faith being complete trust or confidence in someone or something, which would be like getting into a plane or listening to your doctor's expert advice. You have faith in the pilot in that he won't crash the entire plane, and faith in the doctor in that the diagnosis and prescriptions provided aren't hocus pocus, despite not knowing the exact details of how either of those things are done. The second definition is strong belief in God or in doctrines of religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof, which is more self-explanatory, just the belief in religion. I think the episode is trying to tackle the second definition, yet Goddess Faust was responding with the first definition in mind. Perhaps she meant for the episode to be more about the first definition? Seeing how she said this episode is, quote, obviously up to lots and lots of interpretation, maybe it was a mistake. This confusion in definition probably just made the message all muddled up. But anyways, the ambiguity comes from how, let's say this episode isn't about religion. What the f else could it possibly be a metaphor for? The solution to that is that it really doesn't have to be a metaphor for anything. The only reason there's any confusion surrounding the episode is literally because of Twilight's letter at the end. It's ambiguously worded to imply real-life application, which is why people draw parallels to real-life stuff. If the letter just wasn't there at the end, it would be completely up to the individual watching to determine whether this episode is just random fun at face value or if it has a deeper message. Well, that and how undoubtedly unambiguous the existence of the Pinkie sense is, I guess the episode could be interpreted to be like very one-sided. Like if the Pinkie sense was a bit more up in the air as to whether or not it was actually real or not, I think this episode would be more well-liked across the board. But with all that said, it's kind of funny how Lauren Faust herself actually seems to have had minimal involvement with the episode, yet she let out this apology. It's not like she wrote the episode. That honor goes to Dave Polsky, who conveniently has made an extended comment on the message of the episode.
The aim for feeling Pinkie keen? Yeah. Because I know sometimes that gets a bit of flack or cause a bit of diversion sometimes within the fan community.
Yes, feeling Pinkie keen. Well, first off, remember, that was a show that was written before the show had ever aired.
Lauren Faust had this wonderful idea of Pinkie sense. The question was how to write a story where Pinkie sense possibly made sense. So my intention was to give that idea, have it play out as a narrative in some way because that was kind of my job. I can tell you the intention was not to do anything about religion. Yeah. That was not the intention at all. However, it was an exploration of faith. And I don't mean faith in any religious sense. I mean the kind of faith where you walk into this building having faith it's not going to fall down on you. I have faith that I'm going to be up here and none of you are going to shoot me. That may be a misguided faith, but it's a faith nonetheless. Otherwise, I wouldn't be up here, right? Because I'm not, this convention isn't worth that for me. It's not an inherently religious thing. It's been appropriated by religion for various reasons, and we can debate that till the end of time. But it's not inherently religious. The question was to explore this idea of Pinkie sense. Well, Pinkie has this ability. Well, wouldn't it be interesting if Twilight, her ability didn't make sense to Twilight? That would make a conflict. And understand, magic is the physics of this world. Magic actually explains how things happen in this world. Not in our world, but in that world, magic and physics are kind of the same thing. The thinking was, it's a little bit more analogous to if you were in the area of Newtonian physics, and Twilight was a Newtonian physicist, and somebody comes along, hey, theory of relativity, people tried to poke holes in Einstein's thing, right? They turned out to be wrong, but they tried until they said, okay, I don't understand this yet, but I'm going to go with it. Now, that said, little did we know there was going to be this huge adult fandom who was going to be sensitive around religious issues for a lot of good reasons, but a lot of good reasons that have nothing to do with that episode, unless the fandom decides to make it about that. We were not making it about that. I can say that categorically and definitively. If it had occurred to us, we would have handled it in a more sensitive fashion, I think, in retrospect. But we didn't know that. We didn't see that bus coming.
That's a whole lot of words for what essentially boils down to quit looking into messages that aren't there. The point was to show the Pinkie sense and that Twilight does not believe in the Pinkie sense. And I trust that, but I don't know why he hammered on the point of his definition of faith so much here, without necessarily showing us any direct connection between his definition and what Pinkie is doing in this episode. Also, none of this explains the whole soapbox scene, nor what the intention of hurting Twilight at every turn was. But honestly, if there truly wasn't any metatextual religious message in this episode, and this isn't just something that this guy's saying after the fact to avoid more controversy, I'm not sure what the big hubbub is. Though I do have a theory on why so many people were upset with this episode. This may sound like I'm grasping at straws, but if you take this episode in from the perspective of online culture at the time, this episode came out during the time r/atheism was one of the default subreddits you'd automatically be subscribed to on Reddit. So it doesn't seem to be too far-fetched to think that atheists who flock to online spaces such as that, who have also grown fond of ponies, or were also becoming big at the time, felt betrayed or something. Especially when these important dates seem to line up perfectly. I wouldn't be surprised if, that's where a bulk of the controversy for this episode came from. And honestly, as for where I lay on the side of this, I am a Christian, but I don't think this episode makes a good case for literally either side. The atheist side, Twilight's side, seems to be, you'll get injured if you try disproving or questioning religion, which means the universe is against your side. You are also irrationally angry. You are the bad guy until you basically get peer pressured into believing. The religion side, Pinkie's side, seems to be, your sides are arbitrary and silly and nothing meaningful. Also, your beliefs are mutually exclusive with science and they cannot coexist, and people who don't believe in the same things as you are the rational ones. I think both of these sides, well, sure, both of them might have a shred of truth to them, are gross oversimplifications and don't reflect either side as how they'd ideally wish to be represented. Aside from all this, I liked how high energy the episode itself was. And just looking at the episode at face value, I thought the key takeaway was, your friends may believe in other things than you or do other things than you, and that's interesting, which is a fine message by me. Though it might be slightly frustrating as we keep going deeper into the series, this episode introduced something crazy like the Pinkie sense, which sure is in character for Pinkie, but it's not like this has any payoff in the rest of the show. Besides raising a bunch of questions that can't be seriously answered and will likely just be brushed off with Pinkie sense. But on a more negative note, once again, you can't tell me that the Twilight in this episode is the same Twilight as the one in Look Before You Sleep. If Look Before You Sleep came out after this episode, that's one thing, but I think the Twilight of this episode features the characteristics of her that most people associate with her. But the thing is, If the look before you sleep Twilight was the one featured in this episode, she'd probably just observe the Pinkie sense and be all like, wow, that's so cool, Pinkie, show me more. Overall, I like the episode for the controversy and challenge it presents. In case you couldn't tell, there was a lot for me to sink my teeth into with this one. I just sure do hope we'll see more of this soon. Speaking of something we won't end up seeing more of, Spike says this twice in this episode.
Holy guacamole! Holy guacamole!
Or were they trying to make this a catchphrase or something? On the contrary, Pinkie saying this did catch on. The award for the most iconic episode opening of the season, or perhaps even the entire show, can go towards this scene.
So now that you know the elements of a good cheer, let's hear one. Yay.
It's been memed and parodied to death.
What have we learned? How to control. Good. Screaming and hollering. Yes. And most importantly, passion. Right. So now that you know the elements of a good cheer, let's hear one. Yay. Ugh. You're gonna cheer for me like that? Louder. Yay. Louder. Yay. Louder! Yay. Ugh. Too loud.
Beautiful. I wonder how these fine specimens are doing these days. And I wonder if the comments are disabled here due to hate comments. Either way, I think what really cemented this scene as something cool is the remix Avast Fluttershy's Ass by musician Wooden Toaster / Glaze, using the melody of Avast Your Ass by Kitsune Squared, which, holy crap, is possibly a rabbit hole Crab's following in a future video. We'll see. But anyways, it goes a little something like this. And from this legendary piece of auditory product was created. Though, as well known and perhaps influential this piece is, seeing how there's a bunch of remakes and edits and parodies and remakes and edits and parodies of it by other people, the original upload on Wooden Toaster's channel is now unlisted. But while it wasn't, Wooden Toaster would periodically rename this video with synonyms in alphabetical order. Today though, if you go to the unlisted link to it, the video sits with the title Avast Fluttershy's Yellow Peach. So I guess he got all the way up to Y, but couldn't think of anything for Z to complete the prophecy. That's totally not irritating whatsoever. Also, strangely, this won't be the only time talk of Wooden Toaster will come up in this episode. Also, isn't it amazing how Fluttershy's inhale is just Pinkie's gasp reversed? Anyways, for whatever reason, Rainbow Dash has the most convenient landing of all time, and nice to see Fluttershy somehow catch up with Rainbow Dash in a matter of seconds. Are you sure it's not Fluttershy who should be entering the young fighter competition with this immaculate speed? Just kidding. I hate Fluttershy and she has no skills.
I'm not talking about my performance. I'm talking about yours. That feeble cheering. What are you two arguing about?
Were we arguing? I'm sorry.
Okay, fine. Fluttershy can be cute sometimes, I concede. This doesn't mean I like her now, though.
I wish you guys could come to Cloudsdale to see me compete in the best young fighter competition.
Wow, I too also like sports that only certain races of people are able to watch. What the fuck? Anyways, in order to bypass this racial requirement, Twilight comes up with the loophole of casting wings onto Rarity.
Find a spell that will get us wingless ponies into Cloudsdale.
A spell that will allow Earth ponies to fly for 3 days.
Which, from a writing perspective, is an interesting choice. As in, the moral of the story directly ties in with Rarity's attitude after gaining wings. So does that mean that if this subplot wasn't written in, there wouldn't have really been a moral whatsoever? It just feels a little jarring since it comes across as a B-plot when none of these episodes so far really had B-plots. They've all been focusing on one conflict per episode. Like, our main focus is with Rainbow Dash trying to perform the Sonic Rainboom, yet they're introducing this plot point that'll have equal weighting on the episode, which is new. Let's see how they end up pulling that off.
Here it is. The greatest city in the sky!
More like the only city up in the sky. It would be cool if we saw other cloud locations, but we really don't. Anyways, as Rainbow Dash introduces her friends to Cloudsdale, we end up at the Weather Factory, which, similar to this innocuous turned sinister scene from a few episodes ago, using the prompt of how these rainbows are truly made, Wooden Toaster created the song Rainbow Factory, which has the implications of rainbows being made from dead horses. Then came this animated music videos with ponies dying to create rainbows. And this fanfiction to explore the concept further. I mean, I guess its introduction with the storms and lightning is kind of ominous.
To the Weather Factory!
but the story further recontextualizes this scene of Pinkie drinking the rainbow to be really disturbing. But what makes this more disturbing is... Huh? I thought Pinkie liked spicy.
Hot sauce.
That's good. Yeah, rainbows aren't really known for their flavor.
Well, I guess Skittles don't exist in this universe.
Drain the rainbow, taste the rainbow.
Anyways, Rarity decides to also enter the competition since people seem to like her wings. Funnily, the message in this episode about those wings kind of seems confused, but we'll come back to that later. I'm just glad they're finally including Derpy with these eyes. What I'm not glad about is this foam hand Pinkie has. Huh?
She's talking to you.
Oh, I guess that's me.
Wow, it's not like you have a billion other actual Pegasi who've never had voice lines yet. Did we really have to cause this double inconsistency with Dr. Hooves now being a Pegasus instead of an Earth Pony? With the added bonus of his voice now being completely different from what we heard a few episodes ago? Anyways, there's also this exchange.
Okay, number 4, time to go. I love number 7. My favorite is number 10.
Does the announcer lady just not introduce the Pegasi by name, or were the writers too lazy to come up with random names for them?
For our final competitor of the day, contestant number 15! And thirdly, contestant number 4.
Wow, judging by how Rainbow Dash and Rarity don't even get introductions, I guess they don't? Strange. Anyways, speeding up a lot, no pun intended, Rarity's wings melt due to her hubris, and she almost plummets to her death. And Rainbow Dash finally achieves performing the Sonic Rainboom, flying fast trying to save her, tying up both plot threads. Rainbow Dash wins the competition in the Wonderbolt's favor, and Rarity learns to be humbler.
I want to apologize to all of you. I guess I just lost my head.
Don't worry about it, kiddo. We still love you.
Why is that funny? But more importantly, why and how is Lyra here? That's not ominous at all. I mean, we saw Skyra earlier, who, while having a similar color scheme, was a Pegasus. This is just straight up Lyra. Did she also magic herself like Twilight did?
Did you learn anything about friendship from this experience?
I did, Princess, but I think Rarity learned even more than me.
I learned how important it is to keep your hooves on the ground and be there for your friends.
Excellent.
That counts as a lesson? Seriously, just like the last episode, I think if they didn't literally spell out a lesson, these episodes would have been so much better. If that were the case, I'd even dare to say that I really wouldn't have anything to seriously complain about. What I took away from this episode is that because Rainbow Dash was only able to achieve the Sonic Rainboom when trying to save Rarity, there's an application there about how helping your friends will cause you to do great things in the process. That would have been the perfect message. What Rarity said is, nonsense! We'll come back to this in more detail later, but on the topic of nonsense, why is there this one random pony moving while the rest of the crowd are cardboard cutouts? Scary. So, yeah, the moral. It's confusing. First of all, yes, the whole thing is an allusion to the story of Icarus, where the moral is to not push your luck / don't be arrogant. However, a lot of these ponies really seem to be admiring Rarity's wings. So why not give them a little show? Like, we're supposed to take the events of this episode as Rarity was being egotistical, which almost makes her die. But is she really being that egotistical if people were literally swarming around her? Wouldn't the message have been much better if people eventually began to get tired of Rarity showing off, yet her hubris remained the same? This just makes what she says to Princess Celestia all the more frustrating, since no, the moral shouldn't be to just stay on the ground. I think if Rarity, despite basking in glory, gave credit to Twilight for magicking the wings in the first place, or didn't fly so high up, everybody wins! Why jump to the other most extreme option? There is at least this cool parallel, since the very last shot of this episode is the Wonderbolts carrying Rainbow Dash into the sun, which is in stark contrast to Rarity burning up in the sun. If intentional, the message there is probably something along the lines of, if you truly deserve to be up there in the sun, you'll be carried there in support, whereas if you want to be up there due to your own hubris, you'll end up failing. And fair enough, but I really wish this episode would have just let that all speak for itself rather than having to muddy everything by saying a random message that really doesn't apply. I guess that EI rating really screwed the writers over in that regard, but still, this was a overall pretty good episode. However, just because I love subconsciously self-sabotaging myself and bringing in negativity where we could just go without, I should bring up this little video that I remember seeing all those years ago that makes mention of the Sonic Rainboom.
And there was even a high school student that calculated Rainbow Dash's move, known as the Sonic Rainbow, calculates at an average speed of 1,653 miles per second, which translates to about 15 Gs, more average in the human body, and breaks the color spectrum itself along with the sound barrier. That's right, a pony broke the sound barrier. Look it up, kids!
The way he describes the Sonic Rainboom as something that's real and something scientific is a little... it's a little hard to watch this without dying a little on the inside. But guys, be honest, am I this guy just with a different skin?
What do you consider manly? Some would say Arnold Schwarzenegger and his muscles. Others would say Sylvester Stallone and his amazing jaw of justice. And some would even say Bruce Campbell and that chin. But what does an oddball such as myself consider manly? My Little Pony, friendship is magic. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You watch a show for little girls? Well, contrary to what you may think, there are more male teen to adult fans than there are young girl fans. That's how much of a phenomenon it has become. There are tons of internet jokes and hundreds of thousands of fans known as bronies. In case you can't tell, I'm one of them.
I see this as incredibly cringe, as I'm sure most of you do as well, but he's bringing up like the same points that I am, and I think we both make similar body movements when talking.
Every new adventure is every new day is a new adventure, and new lessons to be learned and new characters to meet. Not to mention, the cast is absolutely huge. Now the internet comes in and makes the series 100% more popular and, dare I say it, 20% cooler. And it all started on 4chan. On 4chan, there was a user that said, "OMG Hacksaw, this show is amazing!"
Is there anything fundamentally different between what he's doing here and what I'm doing right now? I suppose there is an intrinsic difference in the fact that he's presenting this in a classroom with normal people who would more likely than not look down on bronies, whereas I'm presenting this on a clearly My Little Pony themed YouTube channel catered towards bronies, meaning the element of fish out of water cringe doesn't really apply for me. However, my soul is kind of dying seeing I watched this video when I was 12, and I thought it was the cringiest thing in the world, and now I've literally become this guy. But back to the actual contents of the episode itself. I enjoyed how we got to see another setting that's vastly different from Ponyville, since I think Cloudsdale is a really cool setting that I wish we would have seen more of. However, we barely get to explore it since the main six only visited to watch a show that's going on. I think it would have been super nice if there was an episode that came out sometime before this one, where we actually got to see some more in-depth exploration of Cloudsdale, which could have been used as a setup to this episode, rather than them having to allocate time from this episode to that super brief tour we got. What can you do? I just sure do hope that we revisit this place sometime soon. We won't. This episode begins in one of the dumbest ways imaginable. So Rarity's standing here doing nothing, and this happens. First of all, why would you not stop Sweetie Belle from reaching this thing? Secondly, if you see the mannequin thing start to move, why not hold it down? Finally, sure, Rarity's reaction is priceless, but this could have been super easily prevented at multiple points of this Rube Goldberg contraption. On an unrelated note, what are these buildings behind the boutique? What the heck are these used for? Is it extra storage for Rarity? Though, back to Sweetie Belle. It is now revealed after 5 episodes after her initial formal introduction that she's sisters with Rarity. And would you believe me if I told you that some people actually got ahead of themselves and headcanoned her as Lyra and Bonbon's child? As the fan labor wiki puts it,
in a period of time following the episode Call It the Cutie and up to Stairmaster, Sweetie Belle's relation to Rarity was not clarified in the show. Lyra and Bonbon's relationship had already been established in fanon at that point. And because Lyra attends the Cutesanera in the former episode, some of the newly introduced foals were taken to be their children. The most enduring and popular of these fanon adoptions is Tootsie Flute, but Sweetie Belle was also sometimes considered a part of that family until Stairmaster aired.
We can see some fan art of this, which, talk about jumping the gun. Anyways, Rarity gets a visit from Fluttershy, who is returning her cat Opal.
I can't get near her without getting a swipe from her claws.
Wow, good thing she didn't actually end up scratching Rarity, with Rarity realizing that she's a masochist and,
I'm sorry I can't invite you to stay and chat, Fluttershy. I've bitten off a bit more than I can chew with this order.
just like me with this whole retrospective.
But you're not eating anything.
No, sweetie, it's an expression. It means that I've taken on more work than I can handle.
Was this a way of explaining idiom similar to how they explained hibernation? It kind of feels out of place, and in a casual conversation, I'm pretty sure Rarity's dialogue would have ended with a simple, "It's an expression!" If this was the intention, that's dumb also because they've already used this exact phrase in a previous episode before.
Biting off more than you can chew is just what I'm afraid of.
But also, interesting how Rarity mentions that she's using this special gold silk to make robes for an order from a place called Trottingham.
They're due in Trottingham tomorrow morning.
A reference to Nottingham, suggesting that it's where British ponies come from. However, that's not a place we see in the show. It's on the map of Equestria, and we see ponies from Trottingham. But now I'm wondering what the context is behind ponies living all the way over here, ordering something from this privately owned boutique from the middle of nowhere.
Look what I made us!
Wow, I thought you guys were supposed to be a secret society.
We could form our own secret society.
This don't seem too secretive to me.
The Cutie Mark Crusaders! Yay! We're on a crusade, a mission, to find our cutie marks.
Anyways, this happens.
I lined them with this special gold silk. It took so long to make.
So she made that in between like the 3 total seconds of Sweetie Belle not being on screen and the gold silk being in one piece. Huh? If that's the joke, whatever, but she also says it took so long to make, so clearly not. Sweetie Belle literally heard Rarity talk about how special the silk is just now.
See? I've lined them in a special gold silk.
So, what a menace! If this was actually made from a different sheet of the same fabric than the particular one Rarity was holding, it would have made more sense if Sweetie Belle was listening on with a guilty look or something. That would have actually made this exchange make sense. However, if so, was Rarity just not taking basic precautions to make sure nothing happens to her material before it gets used? You're telling me that Sweetie Belle took quote-unquote so long to make this, yet Rarity never noticed? Whatever the case may be.
What?
Enjoy squeaky voice Sweetie while you still can, because we're gonna miss it when Claire Corlette's voice deepens and we get post-puberty Sweetie Belle. Anyways, Fluttershy offers to take them in to get them off Rarity's hands for the night, and...
So cute.
Who? Me? I know. While walking towards her cottage, Fluttershy runs into Twilight, and they have this robotic NPC interaction.
Hello, Fluttershy. Oh, hello, Twilight. Where are you off to?
I'm heading to the Everfree Forest to Zecora's to get some of my favorite tea.
Or maybe not. Maybe this is how normal people greet each other. It's been quite a while since I last interacted with anything resembling a human being. But on that note, we get this.
Wow, look at this place. What's that? Are those chickens?
You're telling me it took them till night to get home? Or did they get home during the time it's implied they got home? Yet they're still acting as if they're seeing her house for the first time. Anyways, the 3 do random stuff to find their special talents, and what's cool is how we get a couple frames of what looks like an emo Fluttershy, but
Some pony needs to put this thing out of its misery.
Who? Me? Yeah, I know. You said it, brother. When trying to put them to sleep, Fluttershy sings them this lullaby.
Hush now, quiet now, it's time to lay your sleepy head.
Which is very soothing and calm, but can be pretty creepy given the right context, such as how it was utilized in Luna game. Anyway, Sweetie Belle then gives her rendition of the song.
Hush now, quiet now, it's time to lay your sleepy head.
But I find it a strange detail, how Scootaloo and Applebloom covering their ears before she even starts implies that Sweetie Belle has done something similar to this before. I wonder what the context of that moment or moments was. And while we're here, I want to appreciate how Sweetie Belle chillin' on this cloud is cute and wholesome 100. You know, after seeing some serious cringe and life-scarring imagery that are spawned from this profession I have when scouring the net for pony-related things, stuff like this is very welcome in my books. Though it's kind of sad how if she was doing this for real, she'd fall through the cloud since she ain't no Pegasus. But still, well, wait a second. Why has she no horn? Did they perhaps make a Pegasus version of Sweetie Belle to make this sitting on a cloud thing to make sense, yet the cloud ended up obscuring her wings? Surely not, right? What gives? Because of Sweetie Belle singing, Fluttershy's chickens get startled, and when Fluttershy tries getting them back to the coop, we finally see the stare in action.
No more crusading for tonight, all right? Yes, Fluttershy. We promise, Fluttershy. Good night, Fluttershy.
Interesting decision to make the Cutie Mark Crusaders refer to Fluttershy as just Fluttershy, as opposed to Miss Fluttershy or anything that implies a large age gap where that kind of respect would be expected. Especially when they refer to their teacher as Miss Cheerily.
Now that'll show Miss Cheerily how much we care about her.
Even though there's also no real indicator that the main 6 are a different age than her, especially when factoring in the fact that Fluttershy is canonically older than Pinkie. At that, and while this is fun to think about, introducing Equestria Girls into the equation kind of destroys everything, but let's just enjoy this pony-only perspective theorizing while we still can. The girls realize that a chicken escaped due to this sight, but was this whole thing there before, meaning that Fluttershy is negligent for not patching this up? Or did a normal f***ing chicken Kool-Aid Man through its way through the fence? If it's the second one, let the chicken just go at that point. It's earned its freedom at that point, no? Fluttershy also mentions that this chicken is named
Elizabeth.
This is a funny name and all, but it sounds like they had a pun until Elizabeth, but gave up and just put beak when that's barely a pun. It's more of a contraction than anything. But as the Cutie Mark Crusaders go looking for this missing chicken, we get this legendary interaction.
You're just chicken. And not... Oh, wait. Now I know how to call a chicken Skit-Skittaloo!
Who knew that this one scene would cement calling Scootaloo a chicken as such a recurring nickname by the fans? The show itself will go on to make references to this, and there is a thing that's sort of depressing in hindsight by calling her chicken, but we'll get there when we get there. Anywho, Fluttershy goes to look for the Cutie Mark Crusader so that Rarity and Applejack don't leave negative reviews on her babysitting business, and she coincidentally runs into Twilight, who's been a victim of the cockatrice.
Twilight? Is that you?
Wow, good thing this silhouette actually turned out to be Twilight rather than... Firecracker Burst, Magnet Bolt, Lulu Luck, Waterfire, Sweet Cream Scoops, Love Struck, Cinnamon Breeze, Snowcatcher, Pudding Pie, Rainbow Wishes, Piccalilli, Beachberry, or her mom. I never wanted to think of these minifigures ever again, yet here we are. Anyways, speeding up, Fluttershy uses the stare on the cockatrice when it starts harassing the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Also, nice to see that Fluttershy had her wings frozen, yet was able to do this just for it to go back to being frozen. But on that topic, how fantastic is it that the cockatrice turns you into stone from the back to front rather than front to back or all at once? That she's able to even do the stare? But hold up, you're telling me that out of all the times that Twilight has gone to Zecora's, which is at least a few since it's implied that they have tea together, or she at least somehow regularly picks up tea of all things from her, this is the only instance of her in a life-threatening situation that came from that? On top of that, isn't it awesome how the implication is that without Fluttershy, Equestria would have been destroyed? Since without Fluttershy being here in this exact moment, Twilight would have stayed as a stone for the rest of eternity, meaning that she wouldn't have been there to save the world multiple times. By extension, good thing today just so happened to be the day Fluttershy got into a situation that involved having to wind up in the forest. And I'm not saying all this to complain or say this is bad writing, since there have been plenty of times in my life where a whole bunch of ridiculous coincidences lined up for one specific thing to happen. I just thought it was cool to note all these little things that tie up together.
You're like the queen of stairs. You're the Stairmaster.
Wow, 10 out of 10 product placement. Anyways, this happens.
What happened? That's when it brought you back from stone.
So, she took the whole night to tell the story up to that point? Anyways, Fluttershy relays what she learned.
I assumed that I'd be just as good with kids as I am with animals. I really learned the hard way not to bite off more than I could chew.
Wow, they were really trying to get all of us to memorize what this phrase means, huh? Also, I guess at this point, they were trying to ease into getting ponies other than Twilight to relay lessons, since it was Rarity who did it in the last episode. Perhaps this was all due to the backlash from 2 episodes ago that featured Twilight delivering the message as usual, or I don't know, maybe this is coincidental. Either way, as much of a hard time I generally give her, I thought this was a really solid episode featuring great character building for Fluttershy. Not necessarily on the topic of her shyness and assertiveness, but more so on how we found out more about how her mind works. And how she learned that just because she can take care of animals, it doesn't mean that she can perfectly take care of children. And I think that's a good stand-in for when we ourselves get cocky and overestimate our skills and intelligence. This episode showed that learning curves are a thing, and Fluttershy took that like a champ. This doesn't mean I like her now, though. Don't worry, I'll get to why I don't like Fluttershy as we go on with this retrospective. But let this be some evidence that I'm not unreasonable with that, or at least not completely. But speaking of Fluttershy, Lauren Faust has said that the idea of the stare came from what her mom used to do, which is kind of funny. And just as one more little thing, something that's unique to this episode is what appears to be the Cutie Mark Crusaders' proposed catchphrase.
Cutie Mark Crusader sleepover at Fluttershy's cottage! Cutie Mark Crusader creature catchers! Cutie Mark Crusader carpenter! How about Cutie Mark Crusader coal miners? Yeah! Cutie Mark Crusader chicken herders! Cutie Mark Crusader's chicken rescuers are go!
This looks to be something that would have been a recurring thing in the show whenever they go on to try something new, but they seem to have dropped it after using it a bunch of times in this one episode. Who does that? Perhaps the writers thought that they should tone down on the loud troublemaker aspects of their character and mellow their energy out a bit. I guess we'll see in the next episode. 2 Cutie Mark Crusaders episodes in a row? Don't you think they could have, like, spread these episodes out a bit? I wonder if this was a deliberate decision, just so that the audience has more time to bond with who will become secondary protagonists of the show, or because the writers found them fun to write from the last episode, or if it wasn't on purpose and production was just weird, or just otherwise completely unintentional. But that's quite something. Or maybe it's because they want to quickly establish this.
And it's all yours. It just needs a little, TLC.
the birth of their treehouse. In retrospect, seeing how many things from the first season they gradually dropped, I'm glad this treehouse is at least something that can be seen throughout the show until the end. This, like I said, gives the world some consistency.
TLC is in tender loving care or totally lost cause.
Roasted! After the theme song, we see Scootaloo sketching a map and scootering all over the place, and oh hey look, another deliberate derpy. Also, holy crap, Granny Smith has seen some better days. Did they use the wrong assets? This was from Applejack's fantasy sequence in the Ticketmaster, and every other instance of Granny Smith in real life has been looking normal, so what happened here? Anyways, the Cutie Mark Crusaders go on to do more random things looking for their special talents in the form of a montage. This seems like it would have been a great opportunity to do the catchphrase thing from last episode as a transition between all their attempts, but oh well. At least this interaction between this pig and Sweetie Belle is pretty cute. What isn't cute is this. That's just disturbing. I think I'm gonna be sick. Another thing that's gonna make me sick is... I sure do hope they don't reuse this exact same f***ing visual gag in a later episode. Unlike the sea monster thing that I do wish they would reuse in a later episode, but never do. I can't seem to find a single thing about this squid online, since literally the only thing that comes up when you look up MLP squid is Squid Game parodies. Even when using certain search tools, there's like no results. I did find this thread where this guy's LARPing as what he's calling a kraken, but that's pretty much all I could find. Anywho, they finally wind up at Twilight's library, and what the f*** is Cheerly doing here? I mean, plot-wise, yes, she's here to let the girls know there's going to be a talent show going on, but like, what's the actual reason? Did Twilight and Cheerly become besties off camera? Was she perhaps trying to hang up flyers in this library? That would imply that this is an actual library with patrons, but we never see that, so who knows if that's even a thing. I don't know. I know I let Stairmaster's super convenient plot slide, since, like I said, coincidences happen, but this here isn't even coincidence. There's actually a deliberate reason behind it. We'll just never know what it is. Anyways, the Cutie Mark Crusaders decide to split duties for the talent show, and...
I'm not much of a dancer, but I do like Kung Fu.
Oh, so that was your mistake from a few episodes ago. You're into Kung Fu, not karate. Just kidding. What kind of stupid discrepancy is this? Anyways, once again, this is a very visual gag-centric episode, so I won't break literally everything down since there's not much in terms of plot or themes to analyze or dissect for a big chunk of the episode. I mean, besides the whole looming dramatic irony of the girls wanting to do things they're actually good at and being awful at things they want to do. An example being how Sweetie Belle is proficient at singing, yet she doesn't want to for the talent show, with Scootaloo wanting to, when she sucks.
I'd rather sing a wicked rock ballad.
Which actually kind of retroactively causes a discrepancy in the last episode, since Sweetie Belle's rendition of the lullaby seems more in line with what Scootaloo would sing like, with Sweetie Belle singing in a softer tone, but whatever. I will say though, man, is it refreshing seeing scenarios of these kids just being kids with all these wholesome jokes and interactions.
That's 6 wooden planks, 4x8 plywood, a box of nails, 4 cans of paint, and 4 brushes. Anything else?
Yeah. Instructions on how to use 6 wooden planks, 4x8 plywood, a box of nails, 4 cans of paint, and 4 brushes.
Not that I like watching children in case anyone gets the wrong impression. It just reminds me of back when I was a child and there was still hope and color left in my life, and the future looked so bright and full of friendships and love and romance and adventure. There's something a little bittersweet about seeing how in a show as nostalgic as this, there are things like this within it that adds another layer of childhood memories. It's like nostalgiaception. But I suppose that's a larger concept that we shall revisit way later on.
Talent show's just around the corner. I wonder how the fillies are doing.
Wow, thanks for letting us know by saying that out loud. Anyways, we get to the actual talent show and
got the ring! Snails, where are the... carrots?
Man, Snips and Snails are awesome and steal the show. But anyways, why are there so many random adults here? They didn't even need to make the crowd this big, but the fact that they went out of their way to make the crowd gigantic just makes it obvious that they cloned their ponies when they could have just not had a bunch of clones and have it make more sense anyway. Whatever, this little interaction happens.
Break a leg! Sweetie Belle! What a thing to say! You see, in the theater, it's considered bad luck to say good luck. So you say break a leg instead.
I'm not sure if I'd classify this as another case of them trying to explain a phrase as an attempt to make the show more educational, but we'll come back to this later.
Look here, our 3 little ponies.
They finally performed a song that has some interesting lyrics in it. Like, they sing this. That's a morbid way of putting it. They're saying they'll do this until they're dead and oxygen leaves their heads. Alright. Still, it seems as though some had problems with the fact that the song features purposefully off-key vocals, especially Mr. Enter, who was praying for the Cutie Mark Crusaders' death in this scene.
Oh yeah, this episode has a song, and it's off-key. Wait, why can't I hear anything? Oh, my ears are bleeding. I'll be back when the song is over. And it ends by the stage crashing and killing them. I'm just kidding. Unfortunately.
And also because in that September 2011 Q&A with Jason Thiessen, this was asked.
Cynthia said that you have a real version of the Cutie Crusader song. Yes.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I asked Hasbro if I could bring it because they want to be making sure, and they said no. But you know what? I listened to it, and it was a demo version that she was referring to with a demo singer, a totally different singer, and it wasn't fully mixed or mastered or anything, so it wouldn't be as like finished of a song, and so you probably wouldn't have as liked it as much maybe.
For this to be a follow-up question.
No, I will not sing it. I'm the director, not the performer.
Party pooper, you should have just gone for it. Still, good thing some Russian hacker out there actually leaked this demo version with normal singing in question.
Look here are 3 little ponies, ready to sing for this crowd. When you're a younger pony, and your flank is very bare.
Now, despite having off-key vocals, I actually prefer the show version. This demo kind of sounds soulless? I guess it's not necessarily the point of a demo version to have soul per se, but it also gives an extra level of soul in the final version when you can hear Scootaloo's voice actress, Madeline Peters, totally crack up during this part.
Crusaders! And let's find out.
Anyways...
I can't believe they're laughing at us!
Yeah, me neither. I guess we live in a society where adults are just allowed to laugh at the faces of children just trying to put on an act. What's wrong with you? Also, what the heck? All these adults here are all blank flanks too. Shouldn't they be supporting this? And wow, holy marbles is that one gigantic stage.
Our first award goes to Nips and Snails for Best Magic Act.
More like the only magic act. Like, nobody even competed. What the heck? They could have just at least included all those random kids they already had assets for. Otherwise, what's the point of putting all these audience ponies here? Obviously, these aren't the parents of any of these kids. And even if we assume some are, not all of them are. It's especially stupid when these two, Sunny Days and Peachy Pie, were literally introduced in this episode. The arbitrariness is amplified when that means that they were the only ones without names on the stage, yet they came up with 2 random names for literally no reason.
Sunny Days and Peachy Pie reciting their favorite poem on roller skates.
Also, what the f is Spike doing here? Yes, we've seen that he's passionate about announcing and stuff, but between this and cheerily visiting Twilight earlier, it's like there's a whole other side to this episode with a full plot involving Cheerily that we'll never get to see. I do like their dynamic of just knowingly throwing these glances at each other after Snips and Snails say something stupid.
My medal is shinier. Well, mine's bigger. Oh yeah, well mine is,
But back to the show results. The Cutie Mark Crusaders literally built sets and costumes and composed a whole song and did all these lights and live effects. That's genuinely impressive. I would be genuinely impressed if 3 8-year-olds or however old they're meant to be here actually did all this. It sure as hell is more impressive than what Snips and Snails were doing, or Sunny Days and Peachy Pie reciting a poem on roller skates. Also, I doubt Diamond Tiara didn't take not winning anything too well. Also, do you think Twist here is upset that her friend, who abandoned her for no reason, entered and won a prize with her new friends? That must sting. But speaking of which, that actually makes me wonder about this exchange from earlier.
Break a leg. Good luck.
Did Twilight inadvertently curse their performance to be bad by wishing them good luck? Overall, I thought this episode was fine. I know the episode doesn't exactly have a conclusion, none of the actual conflicts are resolved, and nobody really learns a thing in the end, which seems to piss some people off, but that's just life sometimes. At least the ride was sort of interesting. And as a result, I don't really have much more to dissect in this episode since I can't go off about whether the message is good or bad or whatever. Though one interpretation of the ending is, only stick to what you're good at or else you're going to suck and we're all going to laugh at you. Which is obviously an awful thing to tell an audience of predominantly children who are still figuring stuff out, but that's also probably not the intentional message of it since I don't see why anybody would think that's anything appropriate to put in a show like this. I think it was more in the direction of, we all have at least one innate gift, don't ignore it nor take it for granted. And that makes a lot more sense than the other interpretation, and would seem to be in line with what they taught in Winter Wrap-Up, when the less generous explanation would be in direct contradiction to what they taught in Winter Wrap-Up. But I think we've had enough of these 3 for a while, so let's just move on. And that'll do it for part 2 of this retrospective. If things all go according to plan, part 3, the finale, should be out before the month is over. Like I said in the last part, if there's any cool details that I missed or observations I got wrong or anything like that, feel free to let me know and I'll make sure to mend them when we get to putting together an extended cut of all the parts for Season 1. I also want to give a huge shout out to all my lovely patrons over at Patreon. Chungisoid Geo Nguyen, Nix, Nobody in Particular, Pony4 Coma, T, The Farter 29, and Verfirmed Mutt Joe. If you also want your name in the credits and get behind-the-scenes information between uploads, I'd greatly appreciate all your support. That aside, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been F- signing out, or whatever my thing is. I have to go now, so what?